Chapter 370, Eternal Damnation. Quick, kill him. The third elder spoke with unconcealed fear and a trembling voice. The third elder's words seemed to have a rousing effect on everyone. Instantly snapping out of their stupor, they all began to charge at Jian Chen. The closest person to Jian Chen was the fourth elder, whose eyes radiated with a fierce glow. Just as he stalked toward Jian Chen to swing his sword, a sudden change overcame his face. This was because he had unexpectedly felt his body being squashed with an unknown amount of pressure from the surrounding air. Like an invisible restraint, he was unable to break free from his confines no matter just how much force he put into his movements. Jian Chen's eyes began to dilate with a strange craze to them. He would not hesitate at all to pay a heavy price if it meant fighting with all his strength. Waving the light wind sword in his right hand, he stabbed the azure and violet sword chi-infused light wind sword toward the fourth elder's saint weapon. Ding! As if his saint weapon was tofu, the fourth elder's saint weapon shattered into two pieces. With a muffled cry, a large amount of blood came out of his mouth as his face grew deathly pale. Even after breaking apart the fourth elder's saint weapon, Jian Chen didn't have the luxury of being surprised. With a wave of his hand, he brought the light wind sword down and stabbed it straight through the elder's chest. Ah! The fourth elder let out a miserable shriek of pain as the azure and violet sword chi stabbed into his body. It was as if an unbelievable amount of power was erupting within him as the fused sword chi shot throughout every point in his body. In an instant, his entire body became mutilated and his bones reduced to dust. By this point, the remaining Heaven Saint Masters had already shot down with their sword chi aimed at Jian Chen. Abruptly turning around, Jian Chen's light wind sword tore apart the skies with sword chi as it defended itself against the other attacks. Wherever the sword moved, a black fissure followed. When the 7 Heaven Saint Masters' sword chi struck against the fused sword chi of Jian Chen, not a single of them could predict that their attacks would dissipate into the void. Fourth Elder. Upon seeing the mutilated body of the fourth elder, the third elder's teeth nearly fractured under the intense grinding. Fury overtook his face as he roared out in anguish. Even now, Jian Chen continued to spit out blood, even his pores had started to leak with it. Not only was the light wind sword in his hand fractured, but several cracks in Jian Chen's skin could be seen, slowly oozing blood onto the outside surface. The amalgamation of the azure and violet sword chi amazed everyone with its power. However, with Jian Chen's current strength, he was unable to control this powerful source of energy. Since Jian Chen wasn't able to control it, he suffered from the repercussions. If this went on for any longer, even if he didn't die from the Heaven Saint Masters, then he would perish by the repercussions. Ah! The longer Jian Chen wielded the fused azure and violet sword chi, the stronger the repercussions would be. The torment on both his mind and body had caused Jian Chen to howl out almost animalistically. Leaping into the air with reckless abandon, he charged toward the closest Heaven Saint Master and scattered the light from his sword onto him. The moment the Heaven Saint Master had the sword pointed at him, he suddenly froze in place. Feeling the attack of Jian Chen, the eldest Kai brother blanched as he tried to retreat back only to feel terrified when he realized that he was stuck in place. Even the space around him seemed to have frozen in place as he stood firmly in place without being able to budge. Overwhelmed with shock and terror, the eldest brother immediately tried to use his inner saint force in order to break free of his constraints. In the end, it was futile, he made no advancements anywhere. Right in front of the terrified eyes of the eldest brother, Jian Chen's light wind sword speared straight through his chest before the fused sword chi exploded within his body. In an instant, his entire body exploded into small pieces of flesh and bone before the eldest brother could even scream. And thus, the eldest Kai brother had his life extinguished. PCH. After killing the eldest brother, Jian Chen let out yet another mouthful of blood. The repercussions were already reaching the limits of what Jian Chen could handle. Blood was starting to drip from all 7 openings on his heads, and combined with his extremely pale face, this visage made him seem like a horrifying ghost. Eldest brother, eldest brother, eldest brother. As soon as their eldest brother died, the other 3 brothers' eyes grew bloodshot with anger and disbelief. Blast it all, just what energy is this? How could it be this strong? We must kill him quickly, or else we are all in danger. An elder from the Jeda clan cried out. We cannot delay any longer, unleash your battle skills. The third elder spoke in a serious tone. 2 Heaven Saint Masters had already died by Jian Chen's hand. This was a result that he had not expected. He had never heard of an Earth Saint Master that could kill a Heaven Saint Master. With a mutual look at each other, the 2 elders from the Jeda clan immediately began to utilize their Heaven tier battle skills while the third elder began to make his move as well. Jian Chen, you shall pay for the death of our eldest brother with your life. The third brother roared out loud in righteous fury as he began to use an advanced Earth tier battle skill along with his other 2 brothers. With the Heaven Saint Masters all using their battle skills, the combined power was far greater than the Heaven tier battle skill Ming Dong had used. With just the 3 Earth tier battle skills, an oppressive amount of power forced itself onto Jian Chen's body, causing him to gasp as his bones began to crack under the pressure. In the form of a large long-ranged attack, the 3 brothers of the Kai family released a flame that seared across the skies and shot toward Jian Chen. Ah! Jian Chen let out a howl to the heavens as he focused all of his strength into his right arm and brought his light wind sword smashing down onto the attack aimed at him. The fused sword chi had devoured the attack from the 3 brothers and instantly shattered their saint weapons at the same time. At the very moment their weapons broke, the 3 brothers' blood instantly filled the sky. The glow on Jian Chen's sword began to dissipate now that Jian Chen had reached his limit and could no longer handle either the fused sword chi or the repercussions that came along with it. Suddenly, the weather began to grow unstable as a single layer of black clouds began to descend down from the skies. Several flashes of lightning could be seen crackling within the clouds as well. The atmosphere began to grow tense as the entire area was slowly consumed by this new source of power. Following soon after, an unbelievably strong amount of pressure descended upon Jian Chen, forcing his bones to crack and shatter. Facing the sky with an even paler face, Jian Chen could only see the 2 elders from the Jeda clan and the 3rd elder from the Shi family protect themselves with a layer of saint force. Floating high in the sky, the 3 Heaven Saint Masters were using their Heaven tier battle skills at the same time with a power so large that they had influenced the weather itself. A sharp stinging pain could be felt all over Jian Chen's body as he struggled to keep himself standing upright with a victorious smile. He had already pulled 2 Heaven Saint Masters to their deaths and shattered the saint weapons of the 3 remaining Kai brothers. If he could take their battle skills, then even death would be worth it. In a flash, the preparation time for the 3 Heaven Saint Masters came to an end. In the next moment, 3 rays of dazzling light could be seen jetting toward Jian Chen with a speed that shook the air around them. The 3 Heaven Saint Masters were all extremely cautious and did not want to use their saint weapons to clash with Jian Chen. Unconsciously, Jian Chen had readied his already fractured light wind sword up in a guard stance. Following a loud bang, the 3 Heaven Saint Masters' battle skills struck Jian Chen's weapon and body. Without any sort of resistance, Jian Chen's light wind sword shattered. Filling the air with the pieces of the sword, it began to transform back into the energy of the world and return to the void. Like a kite without an anchor, Jian Chen's body was blown back 50 meters and fell to the floor ruthlessly. It had taken him another 20 meters before his body had came to a rest after tumbling like a ball in motion. There was already a large hole in the cavity of his chest, leaving behind just plain air where his inner organs should be. From head to toe, Jian Chen's body was covered with blood and not a single part of his body was left untouched by blood. An azure streak of light could be seen as the 3rd elder flew to Jian Chen's side. He had no plans on going easy on Jian Chen and immediately stabbed into his heart with his machete, running through his chest completely. The light in Jian Chen's eyes began to grow dimmer. He couldn't help but struggle to keep his eyes open before ultimately closing them for good. In the next moment, Jian Chen's consciousness returned to a formless state. His own spirit had already begun to depart from the world and his senses grew dull to the outside world. At the final moments before his spirit would disappear for good, Jian Chen couldn't help but think back to memories of his mother Bai Yuntian, his father Changyang Ba, his eldest brother Changyang Hu, his eldest sister Changyang Mingyue, his fellow student Tai Ta from Kargath Academy, and the close friends he had made, Qin Shao and Ming Dong. Is this the feeling of death? Mother. I'm sorry. Your child was not able to pay respect to you in the end, eldest brother, second sister, thank you for taking care of me in the past. In the next life, I, Jian Chen, will definitely repay you, Captain Kendall, forgive me. I couldn't fulfill your final wishes, Ming Dong, Qin Shao, my brothers. This is goodbye. I won't be seeing you again. Jian Chen's mind continued to flash with memory after memory as his state of mind grew even more chaotic. He could tell that his time was growing to an end. Chapter 371, Escape from Calamity. The two Jeda clan elders and the third elder from the Shi family all gathered by Jian Chen's body. Although they had managed to kill Jian Chen, their faces did not seem very healthy. That was because they were still frightened out of their minds from the battle. The frightful amount of energy that Jian Chen managed to release, and used to kill the fourth elder and the eldest brother of the Kai family was quick and simple. In the end, even the three Kai brothers had their saint weapons destroyed. This was a show of power that was far beyond what a sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master could accomplish. This left the three remaining survivors terrified since Jian Chen was only an Earth Saint Master. Jian Chen's final burst of energy came from nowhere. Just how strong was that blast? One of the Jeda clan members gravely asked. Silently, the third elder began to ponder for a moment. Jian Chen is quite the strange individual. He must have cultivated some sort of secret technique that is unknown to us. It would appear Jian Chen is no ordinary figure. Let us hope that no strong clan supports him. The other Jeda clan member worriedly spoke. That is unlikely. If Jian Chen truly did have a strong clan secretly supporting him, someone would have come to his rescue when we were chasing him ages ago. It is my guess that Jian Chen was fortunate enough to come across moments where he had gained unbelievable power boosts. The third elder spoke. That's true. We've killed him already, so there is no need to talk about this. Let's take back our ruler armaments then. Most likely, Jian Chen's space ring will hold items of value. If we come across some sort of extraordinary battle skill or miraculous cultivation method, I propose that both of our clans share it in order to avoid a monopoly. The elder from the Jeda clan spoke. Without any hesitation, the third elder replied, of course. For now, let us take Jian Chen's space ring and take back what is ours. The third elder didn't wish to take Jian Chen's space ring without the consent of the other two factions since his space ring would also contain the property of the Jeda clan. After the two elders from the Jeda clan nodded their heads, the third elder took Jian Chen's space ring. Silently he put up his guard against the other two elders. He carefully began to inspect Jian Chen's space ring. After a while, the third elder's face blanched as he cried out in shock. This is terrible. The ruler armaments aren't inside. What? The two elders cried out in shock as well. Let me see. One of the elders took the space ring from the third elder's hand and began to rifle through it impatiently before his expression became extremely ugly. That scoundrel. The elder cried as he flung the space ring to the ground with a displeased look. The third elder looked at Jian Chen's body with a furious look. What a rogue Jian Chen is. With the ruler armaments hidden, they will be difficult for us to find them. This is troublesome. Where could the ruler armaments be? If they are within a space ring, it has to be within 10 meters for our secret method to sense it. Is it possible that we'll be forced to plead the ancestor to use his energy to search for the missing ruler armaments? The second elder from the Jeda clan spoke as he glared daggers at Jian Chen. The third elder let out a sigh as he slowly tried to calm himself. Back in Mercenary City, I could still detect that the seal of Treasure Mountain was located on Jian Chen. It would appear that after leaving Mercenary City, he was able to hide them somewhere. Finding a ring that doesn't emit any energy fluctuations within such a large area would be as hard as scaling the heavens. It appears that we can only report this matter back to the clan. Let them hire a few people to trace Jian Chen's steps to look for it. If they really cannot find it, then the ancestor will have to squander some of his strength to recall his ruler armament. The Jida clan elder said. That's the only thing we can do. After the three men had discussed what to do, the two elders from the Jida clan quickly left the area. They had to make sure this information would get back to the clan quickly. After they left, the third elder took the three crippled brothers and the two corpses before leaving as well. Jian Chen's body gradually began to lose heat as his life continued to fade away. Right now, even his powerful soul was already close to disappearing due to all of the serious wounds he had sustained. The third elder had even stabbed through his head with his machete. If this had been anyone else, they would have died long ago. The world began to grow dark, and the surroundings grew quiet. Only a mess remained where Jian Chen had fought, like evidence of how bitter the great fight had been. Suddenly, an azure and violet glow began to drift up from Jian Chen's body. These were the two sword spirits that had resided within Jian Chen's dantian. They were trying to escape from Jian Chen's body and to the outside world, and within the two glows was a single stone that continued to shine a bright, multicolored spectrum that was dazzling to the eye. It was the multicolored stone that Jian Chen had bought back in Walrant City. The volume of the stone has already shrunk down to the size of a finger. The azure and violet sword spirits and the multicolored stone began to float toward Jian Chen's eyebrows. Slowly descending downward, the multicolored stone began to fuse into the space between Jian Chen's eyebrows before disappearing from view. The moment the sword spirits entered Jian Chen's head, an indescribable amount of attraction could be felt, pulling Jian Chen's drifting soul back into his head. Thanks to the sword spirits, Jian Chen's incessantly dissipating soul temporarily stabilized. Afterward, the three began to combine together in Jian Chen's conscious, fusing with Jian Chen's soul. An hour later, a figure could be seen flying through the air. When he passed this area, he suddenly stopped in midair, then quickly descended to where Jian Chen's body lay. Giving the body a quick look, the figure couldn't help sharply inhale as he muttered, "What a tenacious life force. With even his head stabbed, his soul has yet to fade away. Bah, since you're not dead with such serious injuries, I'll take you home." With that, the man waved his hand and enveloped Jian Chen with a gentle saint force, bringing him along through the air. Chapter 372, A tragic sight. On the second day after Jian Chen's defeat, a tree trunk concealed by several branches in the forest began to shake for a moment before a white-maned winged tiger came crawling out of the tree. Both of its shiny eyes looked around its surroundings before letting out a growl. After looking in every direction and mewling for half the day, the white tiger cub began to sniff the area before heading in the direction of Jian Chen. The tiger cub was extremely young and its paws couldn't support its own weight for an extended period of time. So it could only run for a short amount of time before resting and continuing the pattern. After an unknown amount of time, Jian Chen's muddled head began to clear up as he tried to open his eyes with difficulty. The very first thing he noticed was a wooden roof. Although it was a bit worn down, it was still quite clean. Suddenly, a wave of pain attacked Jian Chen's head, causing him to cry out in pain. Because of the inexplicable pain in his head, Jian Chen's face grew deathly pale without a hint of blood to be seen. The muscles on his face couldn't help but quiver as he felt the room begin to shake before Jian Chen's head fell to the side and he lost consciousness. Not too long after Jian Chen had fainted, a creaking sound could be heard as the wooden door to the room creaked open and a fat male around the age of 20 years old appeared. The male walked over to Jian Chen's bed, but the moment he saw Jian Chen's sleeping posture, his hand reached to scratch his own head. "Strange, I could have sworn I heard a sound. How has he not awoken yet? It's been 3 days already." With that, the fatty left the room. For 3 days straight, the white tiger cub continued to stumble and crawl on the road. Climbing across steep mountains and even falling down from them, the white tiger cub didn't even get a scratch on its tender skin. The only change was that its fur was gray in color with the dust. After 3 days of dangerous traveling, the white tiger cub had finally arrived at the battleground where Jian Chen and the Heaven Saint Master had fought. Sniffing the area, the tiger cub began to growl out loud with an urgent tone as if it was crying with grief. running with all of its might toward a large patch of dried blood. The ground even had bits and pieces of Jian Chen's body. Letting out another roar in sadness, the tiger cub looked around the area once more before sniffing the bloody patch of ground. Then, with a small nudge of its nose, the tiger cub took a piece of Jian Chen's inner organs and put it into its mouth. Although the tiny part of the inner organ had already withered up, there was still a large concentration of energy within it. After eating the body piece, the white tiger cub began to feel a large amount of energy within its 4 limbs. It was as if it had enough energy to support its entire body. There was enough to the point where the tiger cub could feel several sharp fangs starting to grow within its mouth. As the tiger cub continued to eat the remaining parts left behind by Jian Chen, it continued to howl in sadness. Not too long afterward, the entire area had been cleaned up by the tiger cub. By this point, while there was no significant change in the tiger cub's body, its ability to move around had grown significantly. All 4 of its limbs were sturdy and strong, and it no longer had the same difficulty moving anymore, nor were its movements awkward. Opening its mouth, the cub took one bite of the nearby dirt before spitting it back out. The originally bloody dirt had returned to its original state as if there had been no blood in the first place. After 10 hours, the white tiger cub had fully cleaned up the area so that not a single speck of Jian Chen's blood remained. Not only Jian Chen's blood had been taken, but even the opposing Heaven Saint Masters had been absorbed. For the tiger cub, the amount of energy remaining in their blood was like a tonic for it. After absorbing all of the energy, the white tiger cub had grown even stronger. Even the sharp fangs in its mouth had grown bigger and sharper. Once all of the blood was absorbed, the white tiger cub continued to circle around the area with its nose constantly sniffing. Finally, it broke out into a run that made it look like it was flying as the wings on its back unfolded almost like it was preparing to fly. A series of pictures began to flow through the chaotic space in Jian Chen's unconscious mind, one after the other in the form of a grotesque gas. Sometimes, he would see a white-haired elder. Sometimes he would see a red cloud that tore through the air itself with its lightning. Sometimes, it was the 2 azure and violet sword spirits appearing as if they were lovers as they flew through the sky and danced with the metallic song of swords. Occasionally, the figure of a single crane-haired elder could be seen wielding the 2 azure and violet deity swords as he flew through the air and decimated magical beast after magical beast. At times, the 2 deity swords fused into one and created chaos throughout the world, destroying both enemies and the world itself. Then, Jian Chen saw the azure and violet deity swords shatter apart into the world and slowly disappear into a mountain range. After an unknown amount of time, Jian Chen opened his eyes once more as he woke up. Immediately, a dizzying sensation began to occur in his head once more, but it wasn't as severe as the first wave. Therefore, this time Jian Chen did not fall unconscious. Staring blankly all around him, Jian Chen could see that he was currently resting upon a bed in a wooden house. His back was up against a wooden bed and footprints could still be seen on the floor. The room itself wasn't all that big and was roughly 8 meters wide with very little furniture. Where is this place? Jian Chen began to look around himself with confusion. But when he tried to climb out of the bed, more pain struck and snaked up his body, racking his nerves. The sudden intense pain caused Jian Chen to cry out once more and break out into a cold sweat. His originally healthy red face once again turned pale. Gritting his teeth, Jian Chen lifted his head with difficulty to observe his surroundings. This time, he immediately froze in place as he saw a 30-centimeter hole in his chest, nearly separating his entire body into 2 in a grotesque shape. There was dried blood everywhere around the wound. This wound would horrify any person. Seeing the situation he was in, a tidal wave of memories began to charge forth into his mind from when he was battling the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Did I not die? Jian Chen's expression was rather dazed, but he soon regained himself as a joyous look overcame him. I didn't die, I really didn't die. Jian Chen couldn't hold in the emotions within himself. As soon as his body began to tremble, the wound in his chest began to act up, causing Jian Chen to grit his teeth together. After a moment, the pain abated, leaving Jian Chen to collapse back onto the bed weakly gasping for breath. Laying there quietly without any energy, he began to think about his condition. A clear image of his current state could be seen within his mind. His perspective was a lot stronger than what it was before, but he couldn't feel happy about that just yet, and neither could he feel anything in his current state. Right now, the situation that had happened to him had left him in shock. His current situation was extremely grave. It was practically a total mess. All of his organs were on the verge of failing and even his heart was shattered, but even after such a serious blow, he had not died. But that had not been the most serious thing. The true extent of the damage that Jian Chen suffered was from the light wind sword which broke after years of bitter cultivation. Although his dantian had not yet disappeared, there were no signs of the sword spirits. Even his saint weapon had been broken without a trace. The dantian had lost all source of his energy, meaning all of his cultivation had been lost irrevocably. Jian Chen had been utterly dumbfounded. After losing his saint weapon, he had gone from a talented genius of renown to becoming a cripple. This was an incredibly serious blow to him. Could it be? Am I now a cripple? Jian Chen continued to stare at the ceiling with a dazed look. His eyes were filled with an unwillingness. This was because he had far too many things to accomplish still, and in order to accomplish them, he would need a tremendous amount of power. Creak. At that moment, the doors suddenly creaked open as a middle-aged man walked through the doors. He was around 40 years old with a steady face and wore clothes that were patched all over. Despite the poor clothing, they did nothing to hide his unordinary air. "You're awake." The man stared at Jian Chen. Regaining his senses, Jian Chen looked at the middle-aged man listlessly. "I thank you for rescuing me." The man walked toward Jian Chen and stopped at his bedside with a smile. "You are truly tenacious in order to take such a fatal blow without dying. If this were anyone else, even a heaven saint master would have died." The man suddenly stopped talking for a moment. "The wounds you suffered were horrifying, to say the least. Even your inner organs were crushed. Aside from a high-leveled heaven saint master healing you, it will be incredibly difficult to heal your wounds." Jian Chen was silent as he took in the information. With his saint weapon destroyed, he had lost all of his martial abilities. Seeing the look of daze in Jian Chen's eyes, the middle-aged man sighed. "Kid, think for a moment. Even if you were crippled, you can still live an ordinary life. Although it will be difficult to do anything marvelous, you'll learn to deal with it. I'll go ask my father later for a radiant saint pill so that you can heal faster." Chapter 373, Soul Aberration. Once the middle-aged man left, the room descended into a quiet calm. The only thing that could be heard was the faint breathing of Jian Chen as he looked up at the ceiling. His saint weapon had been broken. Years of bitter cultivation and hard work, it had all been lost in the most dire situation of his life. This was a blow that was unbearable for him. He wanted to go home. He wanted to enact his revenge upon the Huayan sect. There was just too many things he wanted to do. But to do all of them, strength would be needed. Yet now he had degenerated to a cripple. Legends had it that even if a cripple were to reincarnate, it would still take a tremendous amount of time and effort to become an Earth Saint Master. The Jessen Kingdom was at its moment of peril as well, meaning that there was an unknown amount of time before even the Changyang clan would no longer be able to hold on. He couldn't try risking the chances of being reincarnated again. At that moment, the doors to the room opened up as a simple-looking fat man around 20 years old came walking in with simple clothing. The fat man walked to Jian Chen's side and looked at the open eyes of Jian Chen with a pleasant smile. "Ah, you're finally awake. You've been asleep for several days already." The depressed Jian Chen looked as if he hadn't heard a single word from the fatty and continued to look up toward the ceiling in a daze. Seeing the listless expression on Jian Chen's face, the fatty had a suspicious look on his face. Looking up toward the ceiling, he then waved a hand over Jian Chen's eyes. "Hey, are you all right? Why are you looking up there? Is there anything good to look at up there?" Jian Chen didn't reply and his pupils hadn't registered any movements either. Scratching at his head, the fatty's eyebrows creased together as he muttered, "I heard from father that you were on the verge of death, but your spirit had yet to disappear. Did your soul take some sort of damage and turn you into a vegetable? The fatty extended an arm out to rouse Jian Chen from his stupor, but the moment he saw the frightful wound on Jian Chen's chest, his hand froze in midair. With such a wound like this, shaking your body would definitely hurt. No, I can't do that. Hey, are you okay or not? Can you even hear the words coming out of my mouth? Both of the fatty's eyes stared at Jian Chen's face with an expectant look. Then, Jian Chen's eyes registered something as they swiveled toward the fatty before speaking softly. Who are you? So you finally speak, and you're not a vegetable after all. I was wondering if you had any questions. The fatty beamed before introducing himself. Hello, I am Xiao Tianyu, but everyone in the village calls me Little Fatty, so feel free to call me either name. Do you still remember your name? I am Jian Chen. Jian Chen spoke with some difficulty before turning back to look at the ceiling once more. Whoa, so you even know your name still. That's good, you haven't suffered any retardation. The fatty spoke with a pleasant smile as if Jian Chen not becoming a retard was a good thing. The fatty stilled as he looked at the wound on Jian Chen's chest with curiosity. Jian Chen, just what type of magical beast did you fight in order to gain those wounds? Do you want me to have my dad to bring it back? You don't need to worry, my father is extremely powerful. He'd definitely bring it back and you can have your revenge. Hey, why are you quiet again? Do you not like talking or what? Hey, just what's so good looking on the ceiling that makes you stare at it so much? I built this room 2 years ago, is it not up to your standards or something? Hey, Jian Chen, say something. Do you not like hearing me talk? But Jian Chen didn't say another word and continued to stare at the ceiling in a stupor while the fatty continued to speak into his ear. Tianyu. A voice rang out as the previous middle-aged man from before entered the room. Dad, you're back. Why is he looking at the ceiling so much? He doesn't look like he has become an idiot. The fatty began to plead to his father for an answer. With a light voice, the man replied, Tianyu, this man has suffered wounds that he has not healed from, let him rest for now. Oh, I get it. Then Dad, I'll be leaving now. The fatty said before leaving the room. The middle-aged man walked toward Jian Chen's bed and handed him a round-looking pill. I know you've suffered an unbearable amount of damage, but don't think about it too much for now. Just focus on your recuperation, living is the most important thing. He spoke before inserting the white-colored pill into Jian Chen's mouth. This is a Class 8 Radiant Spirit pill, although it cannot heal your wounds completely, it'll at the very least patch up the hole in your chest. With that, he left the room once more. Jian Chen's entire body was then enveloped by a milky white glow as the Radiant Saint Force within the pill began to leak out. The amount of Radiant Saint Force in the pill was so strong that even Jian Chen at his peak would still barely be able to match up to even a single %. This was the difference in quality. With Jian Chen's entire body enveloped in Radiant Saint Force, his wounds began to heal at tremendous speeds, forcing even the hole in his chest to regenerate with new skin. Not too long after, the hole had been covered over by new skin. At the same time, the internal wounds that Jian Chen had taken were starting to heal. Even the withered skin began to fall off as new tender-looking skin replaced it, revealing a white and sleek shine almost. Not a single scar could be seen on his body. In a little bit, Jian Chen's body looked as if it was entirely new. Not a single wound could be seen on his body, making him seem almost perfect. Slowly, the Radiant Saint Force began to dissipate from his body. While it looked like Jian Chen was fully healed on the surface, his internal wounds were still quite severe. The Class 8 Radiant Spirit pill was extremely potent in nature, but there just wasn't enough quantity. Thus, it was not able to fully heal Jian Chen. Despite this, Jian Chen had been moved. His previously listless eyes began to recover with emotions as he felt the changes happen within his body. With a hoarse voice, he muttered, "How would I regain my strength? I need to recover all of it, but how?" Suddenly, Jian Chen's mind felt a jolt. It was at this moment that he realized that his own mind obtained a few more things and that his own soul had grown stronger. Sensing the changes within his body, Jian Chen was startled. Quickly calming himself down, he closed his eyes and began to envision himself inside his mind. The mindscape of his mind was chaotic in nature. Nothing could be seen clearly, but in the center, the azure and violet lights could be seen floating around with the multicolored stone slowly revolving around them. These are the sword spirits. How did they get here? What even is this place? Jian Chen's eyes widened in surprise as he looked at the sword spirits. Suddenly, the sword spirits shook as a stream of consciousness flowed from them. All of their knowledge, thoughts, and ideas began to be transmitted into Jian Chen without a single sound by a mysterious manner as if it wanted to be comprehended by Jian Chen. This is my consciousness? Jian Chen realized what the two sword spirits were relaying to him. Soon after, the two sword spirits continued to relay information to Jian Chen via the same mysterious manner. After a while, Jian Chen understood what the circumstances were for him. So I died, but because of the sword spirits, my soul was rescued by them, and now my soul is fused with the two sword spirits. Finally understanding the entire picture, he didn't know if he was happy or worried about what had occurred. After conversing with the sword spirits, he knew that they had fused with his soul to form a special existence. But he didn't know whether or not it was still his soul or if it was now the sword spirits. After pondering it for a while, Jian Chen calmed down. While this result was extremely shocking and hard to believe, his soul had truly merged with the sword spirits while they retained all of their wisdom. While the two had fused, both sides were capable of independent thinking. This was truly a mysterious existence. Just what's going on here? How did I transform into such an odd state? Jian Chen began to mutter to himself. To him, this situation was far too incredible. Another stream of thought came out from the sword spirits once more. I am me, and the sword spirits are the sword spirits. They had only used such a strange method to save and preserve my life. Jian Chen understood the meaning behind the stream of thought. It felt as if no time had passed within his conscious. It was as if the entire area had gone still, but instead of remaining in this area, Jian Chen began to retreat from his mind after he had received the answers to his questions. The moment Jian Chen had opened his eyes, he took in the sight around him. It was only then that Jian Chen had truly taken notice that his soul had grown inexplicably stronger. He could easily sense anything within a kilometer from his position. It was only because he was depressed at first that he felt as if there was no such change from his soul. Chapter 374, A New Power. So my soul has grown even stronger now. Jian Chen thought with surprise. However, he wasn't completely happy. Even after his soul had grown stronger, the only thing that had changed was his ability to perceive things, nothing else. Suddenly, Jian Chen's entire body trembled slightly as he closed his eyes and began to meditate. All sorts of energy from his surroundings was felt through Jian Chen's perception. At this moment, Jian Chen's world had exploded with beautiful colors from every spectrum. He could see just about any color imaginable to the human eye. There was the faint glow of white, the dark color of black, the dull shine of red, the heavy shade of yellow, the rich blue and the lively green. Seeing such a rich world of color, Jian Chen was stunned. These colors were the 6 elements of the world that he was never able to perceive before. In the past, aside from the radiant saint force or the world energy, he couldn't detect any other element. But now, he could sense the other 5 elements along with the radiant saint force. With such a sight like this, Jian Chen couldn't help but think that he was dreaming. Could this be what happened when the sword spirits fused with my soul? Jian Chen thought to himself as a way to try and explain just what could cause such a phenomenon like this. Slowly opening his eyes, Jian Chen began to move his right hand. Opening and closing his fingers, Jian Chen suddenly realized that the room was rather hot in temperature before a flash of red light began to gather around his hands. In a moment, a faint sea of fire could be seen on it. In disbelief, Jian Chen looked at the miniature sea of flames in his hands with a thunderstruck expression as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Despite the flames being so close to Jian Chen's hands to the point of contact, he felt no heat at all. It was almost as if the flames were an illusion and not real. Fire. There's a fire, fire. Suddenly, a frantic shout could be heard from outside the room. Jolting him out of his inner thoughts, Jian Shen suddenly realized the room had suddenly burst into flames. In his moment of stupor, the flames gathered in his hand had disappeared. When he was in such a state, he had nearly forgotten just how flammable this room was. Bang! The door to the room was abruptly kicked apart as the simple clothed-wearing fatty charged straight into the room with a frantic cry, "No, no, no, there's a fire. Come on, Jian Shen, we have to get out." As if he was flying, the fatty flew toward Jian Shen's bed and carried him out of the room. In a moment, the flames from the room began to soar high into the sky as if devouring the heavens. "Put out the fire. Hurry, someone get some water." Several shouts rang through the air as a dozen simple-clothed villagers came running forth with buckets of water. "Tianyu, what happened? Just how in the world did a fire start?" Suddenly, the father of the fatty appeared out of nowhere as he addressed the flames eating away at the house. Wailing, the fatty looked toward his father with a wretched but innocent face. "Dad, I don't know either. Everything was perfect. Just how could the house catch on fire? There wasn't even any light sources anywhere." Hearing that, the father's eyes turned toward Jian Shen with a leveled stare, but he said nothing. The fatty's eyes swiveled toward Jian Shen as if he had come to a conclusion as well. With a gasp, he cried, "Dear gods, Jian Shen, don't tell me you're suicidal." Jian Shen stood up by himself with some difficulty. Although his wounds looked like they were healed on the surface, anyone that looked at him would know that any small movement caused Jian Shen a tremendous amount of pain. "I am terribly sorry, this was not intentional." Jian Shen let out a small smile on his face, indicating that his mood had improved a bit from earlier. "Oh my, Jian Shen. I beg you 1,000 times over, don't be depressed. You're so young, you can't go kill yourself. You absolutely must continue to live." The fatty fretted as he looked at Jian Shen, thinking that he had done something foolish in his moment of depression. At the sight of the fatty fretting over him, Jian Shen couldn't help but let out a small smile. "Don't worry, I won't kill myself." After making sure that Jian Shen was not pretending, the father laughed. "It seems you've already gotten over it. Quick, put out the fire. Faster with the water, everyone move faster." At this moment, the villagers were still bringing bucket after bucket toward the fire in an effort to combat it. Walking forward to stop the villagers, the middle-aged man spoke, "There is no need to be so panicked. Please rest for now. Whether it burns or not, we will have to rebuild it anyways. If you say so, Uncle Shiomi, then we'll take our time." The villagers immediately stopped their frantic movements and addressed the man with a respectful greeting. "Ai, my poor house. It seems that I have to rebuild it once more." The fatty wailed. At this, Jian Shen felt extremely embarrassed. In such a careless moment, he had accidentally set the house he was in on fire. This made him feel apologetic. "I am truly sorry. When I recover, please allow me to help you rebuild." Jian Shen spoke apologetically. The fatty's eyes sparkled on his face as he replied, "Okay then. Don't you forget it then, when you get better, the two of us will build a house even bigger than the last one." As soon as he finished speaking, the fatty suddenly looked behind him in surprise. "Grandfather." "Jian Shen, look. My grandfather is back." Turning around slowly, Jian Shen could only see a hoe-wielding elder walking from some distance away. He looked rather ordinary like anyone else around his age. A single piece of straw held his hair together and even his clothes were of ordinary make. Both of his legs and the clothes around them were covered with dirt as if he had spent the entire day working the fields and had just returned home like a farmer would. "Grandfather, the person father rescued has finally woken up. Let me introduce you, his name is Jian Shen." The fatty cried out in a hurry to greet his grandfather. The elder looked at Jian Shen for a moment before turning back to the fatty with a kindly smile. "Little fatty, why is your house on fire?" The fatty looked at Jian Shen as well. Jian Shen had wanted to kill himself in his depression, but everything's okay now. He has accepted life. After hearing such a statement, Jian had nearly fell to the ground in shock. This fatty's words held nothing back and were based off of his own judgment. It was as if he was still a child, something that was odd compared to his current age. After he heard the fatty's words, the elder began to laugh as he walked up to Jian. With a kindly smile, he spoke, "Youngster, those who do not die are bound to come across fortune. Take this spirit pill and eat it. It should heal your inner organs to some degree at the very least." Out of nowhere, the elder took out a pill and gave it to Jian. Seeing the elder take out another pill, the fatty's father had a shocked look on his face. "Haha, Jian, this is a Class 8 spirit pill, an especially rare treasure. It seems that my father has seen fit to give you too. I thank the elder, but this item is far too precious for me to accept." Jian spoke respectfully. He knew just how rare and precious radiant spirit pills were since they were made by radiant saint masters by using their own saint force. A single pill like this was far more than what Jian could accomplish. The elder laughed, "This item has little use for me here. It is coincidental that you were in need of it, so take it and recover as soon as you can." After some hesitation, Jian submitted and took the pill from the elder. Carefully putting it away safely, he knew that this pill was far too expensive for him to lose. "Little fatty, go and find a room for Jian to rest in." After that, the elder threw down his hoe and headed to another house not too far away. Looking at the retreating back of the elder with a complicated look, Jian didn't know what to think. "Jian, let's go and find you a new room." The fatty spoke as he walked away. Soon enough, Jian found himself in another bed. He needed to rest as little fatty had said, so he sat down on the bed and began to sleep. After a while, Jian managed to calm himself down and tried to control the radiant saint force around him to heal. The Class 8 spirit pill was far too precious for him to eat just yet. Just as Jian began to think, a milky white ball of light began to form around him. Feeling the speed of the radiant saint force gathering, Jian couldn't help but smile faintly. Perhaps it was because of the mutation to his soul, but he felt that his control over the radiant saint force had grown stronger and stronger. Even after controlling it to such an extent, he didn't feel strained at all. Chapter 375, Recovery of Jian. Afterward, Jian began to heal himself using his stronger control over the radiant saint force. Because his internal wounds were even more severe than his external ones, it took Jian an entire day of stubbornly healing himself before he had completely recovered. The following day, Jian walked out of the room to take in the morning air. The little fatty had stayed in the next house over as Jian's neighbor. At this moment, he had just walked out of his room as well only to see Jian right next to him. With a smile, he cried out, "Hey, Jian, are you fully healed now? I thank your grandfather for giving me the pill. I've fully recovered from my wounds now." Jian smiled. "Huh, that's great. You've finally gained some free time. Let's go, I'll take you on a tour of the village and introduce you to everyone." As he spoke, the fatty led Jian by the arm toward the village without a break in his stride. Not too far away, Jian could see the grandfather of the fatty walking away with a hoe over his shoulder. "Grandfather, are you going to the fields again?" Little fatty called out to his grandfather with an enthusiastic greeting. The grandfather laughed as he spoke, "That's right, there's still some plants that haven't been planted yet, so I have to hurry. Grandfather, I'm going to take Jian around the village, I'll be back later to help you." "Huh, go on then, take Jian around for a stroll and get to know everyone. This village hasn't seen many outsiders, so you should be able to make a good impression." The grandfather laughed merrily with a kind expression. Jian looked at the grandfather for a moment before silently following the fatty away. The grandfather smiled as he watched Jian walk away. This youngster is quite the strange one. Right by his side, the father of the fatty appeared with a hoe in hand as he spoke. "Father, could it be that even you cannot see what this Jian is like? This child is no ordinary one, he is no small frog within the pond." The grandfather let out a sigh before leaving with the hoe still on his shoulder. After listening to his father's evaluation of Jian Chen, the middle-aged man had a thunderstruck expression. Looking at Jian Chen's back, he said nothing and instead followed his father toward the fields. On the road, the fatty continued to give Jian Chen some information about the village, like saying that it was within the Valley of Longevity. There were mountains everywhere with precipitous peaks that were hard to climb. The only way into this valley was a single road that twisted about more than a snake. This village had over 100 families living within it, totaling up to 600 people in all. Since they were cut off from the outside world, they could only rely on themselves to support their families. The entire village relied on Fatty's father to go out and bring them essentials from the world every so often, so they themselves never left. That was also due to the fact that the valley was exceptionally deep and connected to the biggest mountain range in the continent, the Cross Mountains. The valley was also home to thousands of strong magical beasts. The distance from this place to the outside world was well over 1,000 kilometers and was fraught with danger. Even if one had 9 lives, if one wanted to leave, it would be highly unlikely that they would be able to. Little fatty, if your father is able to reach the outside world, then your father must be a truly amazing person. Jian Chen commented. Of course, my father is super amazing. Not only does he teach the entire village how to cultivate, but he'll occasionally bring back a super strong magical beast for the village. Because of this, the entire village worships my father. The fatty said proudly. Since your father is so amazing, then your grandfather must be as well, correct? Jian Chen asked. That, I don't know, but I don't think my grandfather is all that strong. If he doesn't go fishing, then he's working the fields. I've never seen him bring home any magical beast, but he is the village elder where even my father listens to him. Have you ever seen the outside world? Nope. The fatty shook his head. I've lived my entire life in this village without ever going outside, but I've heard from my dad that the outside world is extremely large and wonderful. One time my father had planned on taking me outside, but my grandfather had stopped him and gave him a scolding. He said that I wasn't suited for the outside world, and so after that, my father never once let me out of the village. Suddenly, the fatty's eyes began to shine as he stared at Jian Chen. Jian Chen, aren't you from the outside world? How is it, are the people as big and great as my dad says? Come on, tell me. Is the outside world as my dad says? Jian Chen nodded his head. Correct, the outside world is extremely vast, far bigger than you could possibly imagine. However, it is especially cruel out there. One must be strong in order to survive. Little fatty, do you wish to see the outside world? Of course. I spend every day hoping that I can see the outside world just once to see what it's like. Suddenly, the fatty looked at Jian Chen with a serious expression. Jian Chen, you can't tell my grandfather or he'll grow extremely angry. Jian Chen returned the look. Little fatty, if you truly wish to see the outside world, you'll first have to convince your grandfather. No, I can't. My grandfather's anger is something you definitely don't want to see. Although my grandfather is usually kind, when he gets angry, even my father becomes afraid. The fatty instantly turned nervous as he thought about his grandfather. Fine then, I promise I won't say a word. Seeing how nervous the fatty became, Jian Chen couldn't help but worry for him. The fatty let out a sigh in relief. Jian Chen, you're a nice guy. If you were my grandfather, that'd be great. That way, I'd be able to see what it's like outside. At this, Jian Chen had nearly stumbled to the ground. Afterward, the fatty brought Jian Chen around the entire village and introduced him to many different people. Among the villagers, there were plenty of pretty little women that were still quite plain compared to the ones Jian Chen had seen in the outside world. But when they saw Jian Chen's handsome and determined face, many of the women instantly grew as still as a deer as their faces began to turn red. Jian Chen's face was a natural weapon to any women under the heavens. This held especially true for all of the valley women. After walking around the entire village, Jian Chen finally found an excuse to detach from the fatty and headed for the outskirts of the village by himself. In a short moment, Jian Shen had passed by several roads and arrived at a mountain range. Right now, he had to make sure that he fully understood the situation his body was in. He had a feeling that even with his saint weapon broken, it was not the end of the world just yet. Arriving at a small hill, Jian Shen sat down with a tranquil look as he began to meditate. Suddenly, a picture of the surrounding kilometer began to appear within his mind, where not even the impossible spots in one's vision were overlooked. By this point, there was nothing that was a secret to Jian Shen. Even the insects crawling on the ground 100 meters away could be seen by Jian Shen. The azulate sword laws began to form within Jian Shen's mind as he figured that this was the work of being omnipresence. Jian Shen continued to work at this omnipresence, increasing his range from 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers. 3 kilometers. 4 kilometers. 5 kilometers. 8 kilometers. 10 kilometers. Jian Shen's omnipresence had somehow managed to reach 10 kilometers, but this was the farthest he could go. By this point, Jian Shen could see anything within that range without anything escaping his senses. Not even a single blade of grass was left uncomprehended by him. Suddenly, Jian Shen lifted up both arms, causing the earth elements in the world to gather near him. Afterward, a large earthen wall began to form by Jian Shen's side and encased him inside. Then, the dirt began to compress so much that by the end, it had somehow managed to turn into solid stone. Then, the entire area began to soar in temperature as a sea of fire appeared as well. Scoring the entire sky, the plants beneath Jian Shen's feet began to wither as several trees began to burn. The wind began to pick up in speed and blew sand everywhere, forming a dust storm. Countless of plants were uprooted, and combined with the burning trees, the fire grew extremely large in scale. Right after, the energy within the world began to ripple as a blue-colored light blanketed the entire forest before finally forming a large pool of water above. With a torrential downpour, the fire within the forest had been extinguished. Following the downpour, the sunlight began to grow darker as the previously daytime light turned to night. No matter where one went within 1 kilometer, there was only a blanket of shadows that made it hard to see even one's hand in front of their faces. But even then, the shadows began to grow smaller in scale from 1 kilometer to 500 meters. Shrinking once more to 20 meters before finally transforming into a single black-colored sword that floated right in front of Jian Shen. With a point of his finger, the sword moved straight through the air and pierced through hundreds of trees before disappearing into the world. And as soon as the black-colored sword shot through a tree, the tree would instantly begin to wither away. The energy of darkness had a strong rotting nature. Slowly sitting back down, Jian Shen's entire heart was in turmoil. After his soul had fused with the sword spirits, he had managed to gain a whole new set of abilities. Now, he was fully capable of controlling any of the 6 elements within the world and could bend them to his will. Then, Jian Shen's hand began to rise up as a faint glow of azure and violet sword qi extended from his fingertips. Chapter 376, Control over all living things. Looking at the sword qi extending from his fingers emotionally, Jian Shen couldn't hide his joy at all. The sword qi was extremely strong thanks to the sword spirits and was his strongest attack. Although he had lost his light wind sword and years of bitter cultivation, he still had plenty of fighting strength left. He was not a cripple that could not fight. The faint glows of sword qi continued to shine with both colors standing side by side as if it were a natural scene. This type of manner was as if the two were mingling with each other peacefully. In a daze, Jian Shen stared at the azure and violet sword qi. He couldn't help but think back to when he was fighting the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Back when he was at the final part of the road, the sword qi had fused in the same manner. With that memory fresh in mind, Jian Shen's heart trembled with some lingering fear. The fusion of the 2 sword qi had been extremely powerful, causing even Jian Shen to be afraid. It was strong enough to shatter the saint weapons of the Heaven Saint Masters as if they were made of bean curd. This was something that was impossible to imagine for him, but when he thought about the 2 sword spirits making a full recovery, he couldn't even possibly begin to visualize just what terrifying level they would reach in power. When Jian Shen began to think back to just how powerful the repercussions had been when he used the fused sword qi, Jian Shen could only shake his head with a bitter laugh. After the sword qi had fused together, they had formed a formidable power with devastating aftereffects. If it were not for the fact that he had been trapped by the other Heaven Saint Masters, Jian Shen would not have dared to try and test it out. Suddenly, Jian Shen's heart skipped a beat as he opened his palm, causing a mysterious type of energy to fill the air around him. The leaves on the ground began to lift up as if being attracted by some type of force and slowly revolved around Jian Shen. Closing his eyes, Jian Shen began to harmonize with the world to become one. It was with a sudden realization that he felt his spirit connect with every single living thing around him. This feeling was similar to when he used the spirit sword, allowing him to control every living thing. Suddenly, the countless leaves slowly flowing about Jian Shen's body began to shine brightly with an azure and violet glow. With an ear-splitting sound, they all suddenly shot toward a nearby tree with a blinding speed. Without a sound, the tree was instantly pierced straight through as the leaves continued on without faltering for even a moment. As they traveled farther and farther away, they continued to cut a path through any of plants in their way. It was only after 10 kilometers that the leaves finally began to slow down, and in the end, disintegrated in midair without the azure and violet sword qi. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, wave after wave of sounds could be heard as all of the leaves still floating around Jian Shen transformed into a blinding rays of light and shot outward. Spearing through anything in their path, the sword qi infused in the leaves had only disappeared after 10 kilometers, causing the leaves to fall apart into dust. Jian Shen opened his eyes slowly and looked around himself with a stunned look. With a sudden thought, one of the trees near him flew out of the ground and floated 10 meters in midair. Extending his hand, Jian Shen then clenched his fist tightly. Straight away, the entire tree exploded into wood shavings and fell to the ground. In the next moment, the azure and violet glows of light could be seen once more flying from the wood shavings. Flying upward, the wood shavings began to form a 50-meter-long sword that floated in midair before flying forward. As the sword flew forward, no matter if it was a tree that was tall enough to scratch the heavens or just a blade of grass, the sword cleaved it in two and left behind a smooth surface. In a moment, the previously peaceful forest changed dramatically as dozens of large trees toppled down to the ground. Jian Shen's eyes glinted with a bright light as he watched this event. His left eye began to emit a violet glow and his right eye an azure glow. This was a sight that would terrify anyone. With both of Jian Shen's eyes burning brightly with the two different colors, his hands both raised into the air. Suddenly, a strange sort of energy began to distort the air like the space itself was being frozen in time. To anyone looking, this would have been an extremely bizarre sight. Crack, crack, crack. Several of the trees floating in midair began to break apart into fist-sized pieces before starting to shine with azure and violet glows. The lights in Jian Shen's eyes began to recede as he looked at the sight dumbfounded. Both of his eyes had a look of disbelief to them as he slowly dropped his hands. As soon as his hands fell, the trees that were floating in the air began to lose the same color lights. Then, the tree pieces disintegrated away into ashes and scattered. Jian Shen stood still without any extra movements. This newfound change in his body was something that he simply couldn't believe. Right now, he was fully capable of controlling any living thing with the use of his azure and violet sword qi. Right now, the sword qi could be bent to his will and was practically an ability for him to use at any given moment. In the past, even when Jian Shen used the sword qi, it was when he used the spirit sword to fight from long range. The azure and violet sword qi wasn't limited to the light wind sword anymore. He no longer had any restriction other than the distance away from his body, but other than that, he could use any living thing and infuse it with sword qi. This type of power, did the sword spirits bestow it upon me? Jian Shen couldn't help but wonder. Ever since the fusion, he could only see the huge changes to his soul and life. Not only was it extremely beneficial, but the power was far beyond anything that he could imagine, especially since he could control living beings themselves. Jian continued to walk farther and farther away from the valley. Right now, he solely desired to pit himself against a magical beast in order to gauge his strength. Longevity Valley was immensely deep, and while there were very few magical beasts to be found in this part, each one of them were at the very least a Class 5 magical beast. After walking for 20 kilometers, he had finally come across a decently strong magical beast. This one looked like a beetle-type magical beast, the Iron Beetle. The moment when the Iron Beetle saw Jian, it immediately let out a roar before charging straight at him. With a sweep of his hand, a single half-meter-long blade of grass flew toward the Iron Beetle's head with the azure and violet sword chi infused in it. PCH. With a single crack, the blade of grass penetrated straight through the Iron Beetle's head before flying out of it and disappearing into the forest. Without even a cry, the Iron Beetle fell to the floor with a thundering crash as its gigantic body slammed down to the ground. Just like that, a powerful Class 5 magical beast had been killed so easily. Jian let out a breath as he tried to calm himself down so that the pleased look in his eyes wouldn't get too far out of hand. Waving his right hand, several blades of grass turned bright with color as they flew toward the Iron Beetle's body and dug holes straight into its body. Extending his hand, he suddenly clenched tightly, causing a bloody Class 5 monster core to suddenly fly out from the magical beast's body and land in his hand. Continuing forward, it wasn't for another 10 kilometers when 4 crimson streaks of light came flying at Jian from all directions. These 4 crimson wolves were all Class 5 magical beasts as well, each one of them was filled with more wisdom and knowledge than usual. Right afterward, several more blurs could be seen as more wolves surrounded Jian. They were smaller in size compared to the first 4 wolves, signifying that they were Class 4 magical beasts. Jian looked at the wolves around him calmly. Slowly bringing up his right hand, he stared at a nearby tree. In the next moment, the tree suddenly burst into several splinters with sword chi infused in them. They shot toward the wolves like shooting stars. Without any resistance, all of the Class 4 magical beasts were instantly riddled with holes from the sword chi infused with splinters. Even the Class 5 magical beasts had only been able to put up a slight struggle before sharing the same fate as the other magical beasts, finally crying out with loud whimpers. Within a single moment, 4 Class 4 and 5 magical beasts had all been annihilated by Jian. This type of glorious battle prowess was something that Jian would have never been able to accomplish in the past. Jian took another deep breath. He finally had a general idea of what his current strength was at. Although he had lost his light wind sword and his Saint Force, he had gained a new ability. Not only could he sense the 6 elements in the world, he could even freely use the violet and azure sword chi whenever he wanted. Aside from these things, he also had an even more terrifying ability, the ability to mind control any living thing in this world as long as he was within the range of his spirit. Even some non-living things would be unable to escape Jian's mind control. From a certain standpoint, Jian's strength hadn't decreased at all. On the contrary, it had actually increased. At the very least, his newfound control ability was able to make quick work of a group of Class 5 magical beasts. There could be no construction without destruction, and it was only after destruction that construction could take place. After experiencing such a calamitous event, Jian had been transformed. From this moment on, he would walk along another path of cultivation. His strength would break away from the ranking of the Tianyuan continent since he no longer had any Saint Force to measure. Chapter 377, Executing a Class 6 Magical Beast. After testing it out, Jian had a better understanding of his own strength now. With a wave of his hand, a few hundred blades of grass flew up and stabbed into the bellies of the wolves. With a strong thought, he managed to pull out all of their monster cores. After taking off a portion of his clothes, he began to wrap up the cores and store them behind him. After collecting the monster cores, Jian decided to leave the forest. Turning around to face the way back to Longevity Valley, he knew he needed to calm down for a bit and digest the changes to his body. These bizarre changes were far too sudden for him, and the new power he had received made him feel like he was stuck in a dream. He needed to rest so he could adapt to his situation. Ao. Suddenly, the howl of a wolf could be heard, shaking the entire forest with its cry. Jian Chen's body suddenly stopped as a look of concentration overtook his face. Slowly turning around, he spread out his senses for a kilometer, only to see a 10-meter-long, 3-meter-tall blood-red wolf flying in his direction at breakneck speeds. Jian Chen didn't run, nor did he have any plans on running away. Although he was still as strong as ever, in the end he still didn't have any saint force anymore. His speed would only be a little faster than a normal person. He couldn't even use the illusionary flash or the heaven's stolen fortune since both battle skills required the use of saint force. The blood-red wolf quickly came to a stop in front of Jian Chen's position 50 meters away. With eyes that were bigger than the fist of an adult human, they glared at Jian Chen menacingly. Concentrating, Jian Chen immediately began to gather all of the earth elements in the world around him to form a 5-meter-tall dirt wall. Continuing to gather, the dirt wall began to compress before finally forming a wall of hard rock. At the same time, Jian Chen held up a finger, causing a single tree nearby to burst out of the ground and float beside Jian Chen while twinkling with the azure and violet sword qi. With Jian Chen's body hidden behind the stone wall, the wolf was unable to see what Jian Chen was doing. However, Jian Chen could fight against the wolf with his omnipresence-like ability. From its gathered knowledge and wisdom, the wolf had already guessed that Jian Chen was not going to be an easy opponent to fight due to his actions. With a snarl, a large amount of energy began to gather in the wolf's mouth. Then, with a puffing motion, the ball of energy flew toward the wall with a whistling sound. At the same time, Jian Chen had already fashioned the tree to become a long spear that flew forward to stab into the ball of energy from the wolf. Following a large bang, the ball of energy suddenly exploded, causing the energy to wash over the area. The wooden weapons that Jian Chen was using were unable to withstand the energy and disintegrated into ashes. The man and beast had only been testing each other at that moment, but the destructive aftermath had completely reshaped the landscape around them. Both of Jian Chen's eyes shined bright with an azure and violet glow. The left eye flashed with violet and the right azure. Suddenly, countless blades of grass flew up around the wolf and instantly transformed into sharp sword-like shapes before flying into the wolf's body. Caught off guard, the blood-red wolf's body was suddenly riddled with holes, but it did nothing to hinder its strength or speed as expected from a Class 6 magical beast. The azure and violet sword qi was unable to pierce through the entire body as it had with the iron beetle. This time, it was only able to penetrate 3 inches in before stopping. Despite this, it was still a decent amount of damage inflicted. The pain it felt all over its body caused the wolf to howl in pain before energy began to leak out from its body, forcing all of the embedded blades of grass away from its wounds. Ao. Even after all of the damage, the wolf had no intentions on retreating. On the contrary, it had instead grown even more berserk and transformed into a bloody red streak of light as it charged toward Jian Chen. Even more blades of grass flew up from the ground and took on the shape of a sword. With the azure and violet sword qi infused, they flew out to stop the blood wolf once more. But because of the large amount of energy rippling out from the blood-red wolf's body, all of the blades of grass began to slow down as they approached. Even the sword qi in the grass began to weaken as well. Thanks to the shroud of energy protecting the wolf's body, the sword qi grew dimmer and dimmer. At the same time, the azure and violet glow in Jian Chen's eyes began to grow stronger and stronger in intensity. All of the trees surrounding him exploded and caused countless of splinters to fly up into the air, protecting his entire body. With a single thought, Jian Chen instantly transformed the wood splinters to form a draconic shape before flying to hit the wolf. The very moment when the sword qi-infused wooden dragon struck against the wolf's shroud of energy, the wolf's forward momentum began to slow down noticeably. The energy protecting its body was pushed farther and farther back before the wooden dragon was finally able to strike its head, dealing a tremendous blow instantly. Ao. The wolf let out another howl in pain as a large ball of energy shot out from his mouth. At the same time, the wooden dragon that had slammed into the wolf was scattered by the ball and the pieces dispersed into the air. Jian Chen let out a sneer as he muttered, you are truly strong. Let's see if you can handle my strongest attack then. Jian Chen's finger formed a sword, allowing the special energy from the sword spirits to extend out a meter from his fingertips. This was a blade made of pure origin energy from the sword spirits, something stronger than the wooden dragon from before in terms of sword chi. In that moment, the origin energy extended out to fly at the wolf. Knowing just how strong the azure and violet sword chi was, the wolf instantly lashed out with his claws to bat away the origin energy from the sword spirits. But the very moment the two made contact, its claws were split in two. In that instant, the wolf's eyes revealed a panicked air. Unfortunately, the origin energy was already far too close to the wolf so that it wouldn't be able to dodge. In the end, the attack stabbed into the wolf's head. A heaven-shaking howl could be heard as even its soul had been annihilated by the sword spirits. With a bang, the wolf's carcass fell to the ground. Seeing the dead wolf on the ground, Jian Chen let out a sigh in relief. This one battle had made him realize just how far his strength had improved. With his ability to use his mind to control every living thing with his sword chi, he was able to easily kill a Class 5 magical beast, but a Class 6 magical beast was a little harder to kill. If he wanted to kill one, he had to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. In the end, it could be said that Jian Chen had already reached the level of a Heaven Saint Master in terms of battle strength. Collecting the Class 6 monster core from within the wolf's body, Jian Chen immediately began to drag the body back toward Longevity Valley. The body of a Class 6 magical beast was far too precious to waste here. If he could present it to the village in the valley to dine on such a high-class meat, then it would prove very beneficial for everyone. Suddenly, Jian Chen felt something in the air. Looking up into the sky, he could only see a muddy middle-aged man fly over before landing next to Jian Chen. This person was the father of Fatty and was also the very same person who had rescued Jian Chen. With a stunned look, the middle-aged man looked at the carcass of the blood wolf behind Jian Chen. Jian Chen, did you kill this blood wolf king? Revealing a small smile, Jian Chen felt a sense of satisfaction from this achievement. Yes, I killed it. The father clapped his hands in applause. Not bad at all. The Blood Wolf King is a Class 6 magical beast of the third cycle. I didn't think that you would be able to kill one. Just what method did you use to kill it? Now that you've lost your saint weapon, you shouldn't have any energy left in your body. There was a good deal of confusion on the man's face. I used the power of my mind. Jian Chen didn't bother to hide the truth at all since it wasn't necessary. Using his right hand to cut the air slightly, a handful of grass suddenly jumped upward before forming a sharp sword. With the azure and violet sword chi infused in it, they shot toward the body of the Blood Wolf King. Despite it being dead, its body was once more riddled with holes. The fatty's dad could only stare in utter shock before speaking absent-mindedly. What a mysterious power. This power is your mind? Unfathomable. Just utterly unfathomable. Jian Chen smiled but decided to not dwell on the subject anymore. Uncle, are you heading out to the outside world? He shook his head. My father told me to come here. He was afraid that you would be in danger and told me to look around. However, it seems that my father's worries were unfounded. Despite the loss of your saint weapon, you didn't lose your strength. Let's go back, Jian Chen. It's almost time for the noon meal. With that, the man flew into the air before quickly disappearing from sight. Seeing the man disappear, Jian Chen showed an envious expression. The ability to fly through the sky had always been one of his goals. Suddenly, the fatty's father came back. Seeing how Jian Chen was still on the ground, he asked with concern, Jian Chen, are you not able to fly? Shaking his head, Jian Chen replied, I haven't yet grasped the way to do so. Flying is a difficult challenge for me. It should be no problem for me to look into it when we return to the village, however, at this moment. Ah, is that so? Then allow me to take you back. The noon meal shouldn't take too long to finish, so by the time we return, it should almost be ready. With that, the man waved his hand, enveloping Jian Shen within his energy before bringing both him and the carcass of the Blood Wolf King up into the air and through the valley. Chapter 378, Celestial Decay. Seeing how they were flying through the air, Jian Shen couldn't help but feel excited. The power of flight was something he would soon be able to achieve. Since he was able to control the elements in the world with his mind, flying would not be a problem for him. He just hadn't discovered the trick yet. Given some time and experimentation, then he would be able to attain flight just like the Heaven Saint Masters. Slowly closing his eyes, Jian Shen began to feel for the wind elements surrounding him and began to figure out the trick to flying and to increase the speed. Flying seemed simple, but there were many significant details to be learned first. It required constant practice in order to excel at it. Otherwise, if a beginner student were to try to fly 100 meters in the air and was hit by a sudden gust of wind, he would be unable to control his flight. The speed they were flying at was extremely fast. It didn't take long for Jian Shen and the man to return to the valley. It was noon by now and smoke could be seen spiraling up from the village. At least 5 men could be seen scurrying around the village in preparation. The middle-aged man didn't bother to hide their entrance and pulled both Jian Shen and the carcass of the Blood Wolf King to the center of the village before slowing down. Hey, Xiaomi has returned. Xiaomi has brought back another large magical beast. It seems that the village won't be able to finish this much meat. With such a large wolf, who knows just how long it'll take, Xiaomi always brings back such a fearsome beast for the village. He has always done the greatest contributions for the sake of our village. As everyone began to show up, they all looked toward Fatty's father with looks of undisguised worship and admiration. There was no shock at all from seeing the two fly back. It was almost as if it was a regular sight. The father let out a laughing smile before replying back to everyone enthusiastically. There was no hint of arrogance normally seen in a Heaven Saint Master and just kindness instead. Xiaomi, you are too amazing. It doesn't take much thought to know that this wolf was extremely strong, but you killed it easily. One of the men laughed. The man shook his head. Everyone misunderstands. This magical beast wasn't Dash. As the middle-aged man spoke, Jian Shen cut in abruptly. Uncle, let's hurry up and divide up the Blood Wolf King. The fresher it is, the better it will taste. Fatty's father laughed. Fine, De Zhuang, go and find some of the more able-bodied men to skin the carcass and divide up the meat. You got it. The man responded enthusiastically before gathering up the men. Whoa, Dad, you brought back another big magical beast. A cordial voice could be heard from behind as a muddy fatty could be seen walking with a hoe in hand. He must have returned from tilling the fields with his grandfather. Without any further explanation, the father took Jian Shen back to eat a meal after greeting everyone. The meal had been cooked by Fatty's mother. She looked no older than 30 years old and was spectacular in appearance. There was the grand air of a noble about her, and despite the common clothing she was wearing, it did nothing to hide her mannerisms. It didn't take more than a single look to figure out that she wasn't raised from the village. Sitting at the table with the family of 4, Jian Shen began to eat. The meal was rather simple and consisted of vegetables they grew themselves. The grandfather of Fatty gave a deep look to Jian Shen before smiling. Youngster, come to the cornfields with me for a while later. There's a plot of land that requires cultivating. Grandfather, Jian Shen only just healed. Why would you make him do manual labor? Wait for Dad and I to finish planting the cabbages, we'll help you then. There was a complaint to be heard from Fatty, showing that he was clearly dissatisfied from his grandfather asking Jian Shen to do some farming. Upon hearing the grandfather's request for him to help till the fields, Jian Shen was stunned for a moment. Then a relieved look took over his face. Fine. But I've never farmed before, so if there is anything I don't understand, I hope that senior will give me pointers. Jian Shen knew that the grandfather was a hidden expert that was living in seclusion for some unknown reason. Jian Shen wouldn't squander a chance to talk to the grandfather for any reason. No need to call me senior, my family name is Xiao. As the village elder, you may call me Elder Xiao or Uncle Xiao. The grandfather spoke with a kind voice. After the meal, Jianchen followed Elder Xiao out toward the cornfields with a hoe on the top of his shoulder. When Jianchen looked at the hoe on his shoulder, he couldn't help but force out a smile. Could it be that with your noble status, you feel that this hoe is degrading your status? The grandfather's face had already lost the kindly expression he had back in the village. Right now, he was expressionless. It would appear that the kindly expression would only appear within the village. Elder Xiao, you misunderstand. That was not my thought at all. This is my very first time farming with a hoe before, so it is a new sensation. Jianchen tried to explain. And, then that's fine. No matter how strong you are or how high your status is, you must never throw away your conscience. A man's conscience is extremely important. One must be kind and benevolent in order to attain the highest level of mastery. Take heed to this. Even if you are a genius without equal and have only success after success, in the end, your achievements will amount to nothing. The elder spoke. This junior will remember these words. Jianchen spoke modestly. Elder Xiao continued to walk toward the field with the hoe in hand. I know that your heart doesn't truly understand the meaning of my words. But you must know, all those within the continent who have reached the Saint Ruler realm have always decided to shun the world. It is very rare that they roam the outside world. Jianchen narrowed his eyes as he thought about the words. This junior has always thought that those who have reached such a level have practically detached themselves from the secular world and all of the worldly enticements. That is why they do not appear in the outside world often, but hearing Elder Xiao's words, is that the true reason? Correct, the situation isn't as you thought. For all those who have reached the Saint Ruler realm, they have already comprehended the existence of the profound mysteries of the world. At the same time of gaining such a strength, they also feel the restrictions of the world. The restrictions of the world? Jianchen was extremely curious now. This was the very first time he had heard of such a matter relating to a saint ruler. Correct, the restrictions of the world. After reaching the realm of the saint ruler, they will receive the punishment of the celestial decay. The celestial decay is a terrifying matter that has never been broken free from. It's a rule that is specifically directed toward those saint rulers who have violated any of the laws. Elder Xiao's face grew somber as he talked, an indicator of just how terrifying the celestial decay was. Elder Xiao, just what is this celestial decay? Is it truly that terrifying? Jianchen was curious. He had never heard of such a thing before, so it was hard to not be curious. The celestial decay is a law of the world that transcends time itself. It is able to eliminate or discipline those at the saint ruler level or higher. There are 5 different stages to the celestial decay. The hair becomes as dry as hay, the body withers away, the blood within the body evaporates, the inner organs begin to burn, and finally the soul itself dies out. By this point, the body and soul are truly extinguished. Within the Tianyuan continent, no matter how strong of an ability one has, if they commit a great sin, they will not be able to escape the punishment of the celestial decay. Thus, the celestial decay is a rule that regulates even saint rulers to prevent them from committing any sins. Then what is considered to be committing a great sin? Jianchen asked. At that moment, the 2 men had reached the fields. Swinging his hoe down to till the earth, Elder Xiao began to speak. The exact details are unknown, but after many years, those who have violated the rules of the world spoke of their experiences. From this, we gathered that a saint ruler who slaughters countless innocents or one who commits an act of injuring the heavens will undoubtedly receive the punishment of the celestial decay. Other than that, we are still not sure what else violates the rules. The celestial decay is a law of the world that regulates saint rulers and higher from committing any sins. But it has never appeared within a saint ruler that has secluded himself from the world. The reason why is because of one thing, conscience. Conscience? Jianchen asked. Correct, it is conscience. The world of mortals is a large vat. If one is pure and honest, then they will dye the human world with color. To lose your conscience is to be weak-willed and give in to the temptations of money and power. If a saint ruler wishes to progress in improvement, they must continue to try and comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. One's attitude toward the profound mysteries of the world must be calm and be able to withstand any of the worldly temptations. Once the soul is as close to the world as possible, that is when the comprehension of the profound mysteries of the world come even faster. If one is swayed by the worldly temptations, then they would be stuck in a game like Go. No matter where you go and no matter how much you try to harmonize with the world, it will be impossible to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. If one cannot regain their conscience, then there can be no progress. Elder Xiao dug his hoe into the ground again and again as he spoke to Jian Chen. Hearing this, Jian Chen had no words to say. He continued to think about the words Elder Xiao had said. His words had brought about a great revelation for Jian Chen. Truly, listening to the words of a wise man was superior than to studying books for 10 years. A saint ruler's way of cultivation was not like the regular way of cultivating saint force to improve themselves. They walked a different path by trying to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. Youngster, I can tell that you are not a fish meant for the pond. You will have a grand future. Despite the loss of your saint weapon, it has done nothing to impact your future growth. I only wish for you to grab hold of your conscience and to not be lost in the mortal world. Break away from the world and cultivate to the very peak. Elder Xiao stared at Jian Chen with a heavy gaze. Chapter 379, Flying Through the Air. Elder Xiao, thank you for your guidance. This junior will definitely remember these words. Jian Chen spoke with an apprehensive feeling in his heart. Separating from the mortal world was easier said than done. He was barely 20 years old with many things left to do such as revenge. He had not yet felt enough of the warmth from life with his family, so there was no way for him to break away from the mortal world just yet, unlike the elders who had already done so. To a 20-year-old youth like Jian Chen, breaking away from the mortal world was impossible. As long as you remember my words. I know you cannot hope to achieve such a step right now, but you must take heed to never lose your conscience. Do not be deceived by hatred, greed, or power. Elder Xiao continued to speak while brandishing the hoe at the ground. This junior understands. Jian Chen was like a modest student who was listening intently to his teacher. As the elder tilled the ground, he suddenly stopped to turn back to Jian Chen. Youngster, would it be possible for you to show me your current strength to satisfy my curiosity? I already know of your battle with the Blood Wolf King, but your ability is something that I have never seen before in my entire life. Jian Chen couldn't help but feel shocked. He hadn't thought that his every single move and action had been monitored by Elder Xiao. But then, thinking back to just how strong Elder Xiao was, Jian Chen felt relieved. This junior has only just received this power, so I do not fully understand it just yet. If Elder Xiao has any pointers to give, then please. With that, Jian Chen's eyes began to flash brightly. With a single thought, the ground beneath them began to float up into the air from the power of some mysterious force. Then, an azure and violet glow began to appear before flying straight toward Elder Xiao without any hesitation. But then, before the clods of mud could even get within a meter of Elder Xiao, they suddenly stopped midair. Elder Xiao's eyes contained surprise as he muttered, "This is truly a queer ability. I can only sense an azure and purple ray of light with a strong amount of power within the mud. This power is something I've never seen or heard before. Just what is this?" The elder hadn't made a single move, but he had somehow managed to bring the floating dirt back down to the ground without any of the azure or violet light left in it. Jian Chen was overwhelmed with shock. Elder Xiao's strength had been at such a level that Jian Chen couldn't even begin to comprehend it. With a single action, Jian Chen had been left dumbstruck. Jian Chen's eyes began to flash with a bizarre azure color in one eye, and a bizarre violet color in the other. Some of the weeds and dirt on the ground began to rise up once more and transform into a single streak that wrapped around the elder with the two glows. The elder smiled faintly, "Youngster, this ability of yours is quite extraordinary. Although the saint rulers who were able to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world can control items with their thoughts, they did not have this azure and violet color to it. This azure and violet glow, however, can constitute as a powerful threat to only Heaven's Saint Masters. If you tried it against someone like me, then it would not be enough. Elder Shou spoke as the attack around him disappeared and dirt fell back to the ground. Jian Shen was stunned, but he wasn't giving up just yet. With a flash of azure and violet in his eyes, sword Qi began to gather in his right hand before forming a meter-long sword. This was the origin energy of the sword spirits. With a flash of violet, Jian Chen's sword Qi struck out at Elder Shou. Elder Shou seemed to have stopped right in front of the attack. Looking at the origin energy radiating from the sword Qi, he began to mutter, "What a strong amount of sword intent, this aura." It seems like, in the next moment, the elder became engrossed in his own thoughts. Just as the origin energy coming from Jian Chen's sword Qi got within a meter of Elder Shou, an unknown energy suddenly prevented it from moving forward. This energy was so strong, even the origin energy of the sword Qi had no chance. Losing color in his face, Jian Chen hadn't thought that the elder's strength would be that strong. Even with the origin energy, he had still been unable to get close to the elder. It was like he was an infant compared to Elder Shou. Even as he stood there, Jian Chen was unable to do a single iota of damage. When Jian Chen had used his mind to feel around the elder's body, he immediately sensed that the elder was like a piece of the world itself. The origin energy of the sword spirits had been blocked by this worldly energy. Against such a boundless source of energy, Jian Chen felt like a tiny boat in a giant ocean. With a deep breath, he began to absorb the origin energy from the sword spirits back into his body. What surprised Jian Chen the most was that Elder Shou's strength had already reached a level he could only dream to reach. Elder Shou stared at Jian Chen's right hand with an unnaturally serious expression before asking, "Youngster, would you be able to tell me? What was that energy in your hand, where did it come from?" "I call it the azure and violet sword Qi, a type of origin energy." Jian Chen spoke without revealing much. "Azure and violet sword Qi, origin energy. So that person was you after all." Elder Shou muttered to himself. "What was that, Elder Shou?" Jian Chen asked in confusion. "It's nothing." "Youngster, are you able to use that energy at will?" Elder Shou stared at Jian Chen with rapt attention. Jian Chen nodded his head, "As of right now, I can use it freely." "Elder Shou, is something wrong?" "It's nothing. I only feel that this energy is not at its peak state yet." The elder replied. "The origin energy is very weak, so it hasn't reached an optimal state yet." Jian Chen replied with a half-truth. "So that's it." The elder suddenly came to a realization. "Youngster, right now you are primarily focused on using your thoughts to attack. In regards to your cultivation path, you will have to continuously practice with your mind. Right now you can easily control tiny objects without a problem, but if you wish to push a giant mountain with just your mind alone, this will not be an accomplishable task. Aside from strengthening your thoughts, you must also comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. Although your strange origin energy is extremely strong, it is still an energy of the world. The profound mysteries of the world are the way of the king since they are capable of allowing you to control the energy of the world. I thank Elder Shou for his guidance. This junior will do as senior says." For the rest of the afternoon, Jian Chen and the elder both continued to till the cornfields. After learning many things in regards to the profound mysteries of the world from Elder Shou, Jian Chen had begun to ask even more questions. Elder Shou did his best to answer any questions he had, allowing Jian Chen to benefit greatly from his insight and added to his current understanding. On the second day, Elder Shou didn't call Jian Chen to the fields. Jian Chen still had his own things he needed to do, so he took the initiative to tell Fatty that he would be heading out by himself. Looking at a patch of grass, Jian Chen started to feel for the world energy. As the energy began to fly around his body, Jian Chen felt a slight breeze. Jian Chen hadn't made any movements and stood as still as a statue. The fierce wind began to pick up and his clothes began to flap from the gusts of wind. 2 hours later, the winds around Jian Chen's body had grown even stronger. Finally, his entire body began to slowly lift into the air by increments of 3 inches without stopping. Like earlier, Jian Shen kept his eyes shut as he continued to feel for the wind element around his entire body. His spirit was completely immersed in the thought of making him fly. To be able to fly through the air was an ability that Jian Shen had coveted. And today was the day he would finally grab hold of it. His heart was already incapable of describing the joy he was feeling at this current moment. Bang! Suddenly, Jian Shen's head struck against the tree in front of him. Straight away, his entire body lost balance and began to fall from the air. Opening his eyes after the ordeal, he climbed up from the ground. It was a good thing his body was different than a regular person's body, otherwise, he would have broken several bones without the usage of Saint Force to protect his body. It seems that the power of flight isn't something to play around with. I must cultivate even more. Jian Shen sighed. Afterward, Jian Shen relentlessly practiced the power of flight. He continued to float 10 meters above the ground for 6 hours before he finally managed to piece together his experiences and go for an even higher height. Flying straight up for another 100 meters without stopping, he could only see wisps of cyan light flow around him. This was the wind element. At this moment, a villager suddenly spotted Jian Shen floating 100 meters up in the air. With his mouth dropped wide open, he began to point at Jian Shen with a quivering lip. He's, but he was completely unable to finish his sentence in his shock. Elder Wang, what are you stammering around for? Did you forget how to talk? The villager to his side laughed at him before looking in the direction the villager was pointing. Straight away, he too gasped in shock as he cried, "Good gods, isn't that the youth Xiaomi brought back? How is he able to fly like Xiaomi? Could he be a heaven saint master as well?" The sight of Jian Shen 100 meters up into the air was an extremely eye-catching sight. Such an event didn't take long for everyone to witness. Each villager could only look on in utter disbelief. Oh my god, Jian Shen could fly? Is he a heaven saint master? God, this is unbelievable. Even the little fatty who was working the fields had noticed Jian Shen and instantly cried out in shock. All of a sudden, a strong gust of wind blew across the concentrating figure of Jian Shen, forcing his body to shake back and forth. Unable to keep control, Jian Shen began to plummet down to the ground. With a change in expression, Jian Shen began to collect his thoughts once more before drawing the wind elements close to him. At the same time, a cyan-colored figure could be seen flying straight for Jian Shen a good distance away. It was little fatty's father, Xiaomi, who had seen the predicament Jian Shen was in and came by quickly to help. Chapter 380, Leaving Longevity Valley. Jian Shen's figure continued to free fall down toward the ground. Now that he had lost his Saint Force, a fall 100 meters up in the air would inflict fatal wounds if it didn't kill him outright. Unafraid of the threat of death, Jian Shen began to use his mind to control the wind elements in the world once more. In an experiment to regain control, he was finally able to break his fall just as he reached 50 meters above ground and thus avoiding danger. Letting out a deep breath as he shook off any lingering fear, he began to think. The power of flight seemed almost infinite, but it was not something to be played around with. If one's control wasn't flawless, then they would be risking their life. Xiaomi flew toward Jian Shen before smiling at him. "Youngster, are you fine?" "Yes, I'm fine." Jian Shen spoke with a slight amount of panic still in his heart. Xiaomi began to laugh. "Youngster, if you're not that proficient with the ability to fly, then it would be best to not fly so high. In the case that you begin to fall from 100 meters, or even 1,000 meters, even a heaven saint master would not be able to escape with light injuries." Xiaomi began to impart his experiences with Jian Shen before explaining several tricks to Jian Shen. Then, he left to go back to the fields. After experiencing such an event, Jian Shen didn't dare fly too high and instead remained only 10 meters above the ground. For the next 3 days, Jian Shen spent the majority of his time practicing his ability to fly. It was fortunate that his ability to perceive was strong. It would normally take a person a month or two to be able to grasp the concept of being able to fly. In just a measly 3 days, he completely understood how to fly. Right now, Jian Chen's ability to fly was as strong as his ability to walk on solid ground. He had absolutely no difficulties at all, and if he were to be blown by a fierce gale 1,000 meters up in the air, he would feel nothing. He was as steady as a house without an iota of balance lost to the wind or even a risk of him plummeting to the ground. Even Xiao Mi could only exclaim in astonishment at the sight of Jian Chen mastering the ability to fly in 3 days. Applauding, he remarked that when he became a Heaven Saint Master, he had squandered 2 months on learning to fly. Today, Jian Chen was eating a meal with the rest of the family. Although Xiao Mi and Elder Xiao no longer needed to eat, they had become used to eating 3 meals a day and continued to live like regular people. At the table, Jian Chen looked at the family and spoke, "Little fatty, Aunt Xiao, Uncle Xiao Mi, Elder Xiao, I plan to leave Longevity Valley for a few days and bring back several of my things." Upon hearing that Jian Chen was planning to head out to the outside world, an indescribable sheen could be seen in Fatty's eyes. After looking at his grandfather, the sheen disappeared. With an envious look, he spoke, "Jian Chen, come back soon. You promised to help me build a new house, don't forget." Laughing, Jian Chen said, "Don't worry, little fatty. I've already promised you that I will. Wait for me to bring back my things. I'll definitely help you build a new house." Jian Chen, Longevity Valley has at least 1,000 kilometers to travel to get to the outside world. Furthermore, the road is filled with dangerous magical beasts, you'd best be careful. The father, Xiao Mi, said with concern. Taking a bite out of the steamed bun in his hands, he spoke with a slightly muffled voice, "Don't worry, Uncle Xiao Mi. I'll definitely be careful." The grandfather hadn't spoken a word and continued to eat his morning meal in silence. After the meal and a goodbye, Jian Chen flew into the air and took off in the direction indicated by Xiao Mi. It was the way to leave the valley. Jian Chen was flying 500 meters above the ground, only to feel the wind blow past his ears and under his legs. Right now, he was feeling a feeling he had never felt before, but he knew it made him happy. Flying through the air and running on the ground were 2 separate matters. Although he wasn't as fast as when he used the Heaven's Stolen Fortune and Illusionary Flash, he still traveled at a decent pace. His speed with the wind elements aiding him was slower than the 3rd elder of the Shi family, but he was barely expending any effort to move. With his strong mind, he could control a small amount of the wind to help him fly through the air without consuming much energy. This was the very first time that Jian Chen was flying through the air with his own power, so there was a feeling of fresh wonder. On the way, he continued to look all around him while appreciating the view. At that moment, a black cloud suddenly flew toward Jian Chen a small distance away. When Jian Chen saw the black cloud headed toward him, his eyes took on a sharp glare as he tried to see just what was coming at him. As it turns out, the black cloud was actually several hundred flying magical beasts. So I came across a flock of black-winged birds. Jian Chen had read about the black-winged birds within the library at Kargath Academy. These birds lived together in the mountains and had large bodies. A mature black-winged bird was the size of an adult human at the very least with a wingspan of 10 meters. These black-winged birds weren't Class 5 magical beasts, they were generally Class 3 or Class 4 at the most. Without decreasing his speed, Jian Chen flew toward the flock of black-winged birds. Just as he got within 10 kilometers, several trees from under the flock suddenly burst upward. In an explosion of splinters, the trees flew toward the flock like azure and violet shooting stars. Caught off guard, the black-winged birds were struck through their bodies by the trees and began to fall to the ground. In a span of a few moments, the hundreds of birds were all unable to resist with multiple wounds over their bodies, rendering them incapable of flight. Now that Jian Chen's strength was equivalent to that of a Heaven Saint Master, a Class 4 magical beast like the black-winged birds were no match. With Jian Chen's ability to control any living thing with just his mind, he could fight against his enemy using the tactics of the majority against the minority. On the way, Jian Chen had come across 3 other disturbances with magical beasts. However, these magical beasts weren't Class 4, and were Class 5 magical beasts. They all had an innate wisdom and instinct that warned them to not attack any person that could fly. 4 hours later, Jian Shen had traveled 2,000 kilometers before arriving at a mountain range. Then, after another 100 kilometers, he finally arrived at the battleground where he fought the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Without any further hesitation, he quickly flew forward another 100 kilometers to the place where he had hidden the white tiger cub. It didn't take long for Jian Shen to arrive there. Slowly descending to the ground, he came to the tree where he had hidden the tiger cub. The moment he saw that the cover was gone and the tree barren, he realized the tiger cub was nowhere to be seen. This was not a surprise for Jian Shen. He had spotted the traces earlier and tried to track where the tiger cub had gone. After some time, he wasn't able to find anything. Jian Shen began to grow solemn by this point, but he was not frantic just yet. Although the tiger cub was lost, he still had a method of finding the tiger cub. Immediately rising up from the ground, he flew toward Mingyang City. An hour later, he arrived in the skies above and without any form of concealment, flew into the city in front of everyone's eyes. By now, Mingyang City had already returned to its normal state. The frenzied mood they had been in while looking for the tiger cub had long since passed, and even the portraits of Jian Chen's face had been taken down. After the second day of Jian Chen's departure, all news relating to the event had disappeared. But when Jian Chen flew into the sky, he was instantly spotted by the people down below. Each one raised their heads to the sky and dropped their mouths in shock. Quickly, news began to circulate around the city, and thus everyone became aware that a Heaven Saint Master had arrived in their city. The city lord's mansion was the very first to grab hold of this information and immediately dispatched some soldiers to greet him. In this era where saint rulers secluded themselves from the world, Heaven Saint Masters were widely regarded as the top of the pyramid on the continent. For a Heaven Saint Master to come to Mingyang City, that was no small event. Within the Huangpu clan, the affair that had happened some time ago had no major impact on their clan. The entire compound was calm once more, and several troops patrolled around the compound as a way to guarantee their safety. Just as a squadron was walking past an abandoned house, someone suddenly cried out, "Captain, look up at the skies." At that, the soldiers lifted their heads to the sky one by one, and when they looked, they were instantly stunned and their eyes grew as wide as dinner plates. A simple clothed person was slowly descending from the sky just 3 meters away from the squadron. Heave! Heaven! Heaven Saint Master! The captain had a look of utter shock as he stared at the young face of Jian Shen, unable to believe his eyes. For a youth this young to reach the realm of a Heaven Saint Master, it was almost completely unheard of. Respectful sir, I am the captain of Unit 3 of the Huangpu clan, how may I serve you? The captain tried to quash the surprise in his voice, but had stuttered as he spoke to him. Jian Shen cast a glance at the guard briefly before waving his hand. "This place doesn't concern you, go do whatever you were doing." With that tone, it was almost as if Jian Shen was the master of the Huangpu clan. The captain didn't make any objections and only respectfully saluted him in response before bringing his guards away from the area. Chapter 381, The Disappearance of the Little White Tiger. After the guards left, Jian Shen had a faint smile on his face. Bringing up his right hand for a moment, a space ring suddenly flew out the window before landing on his hand. This space ring was the ring that was holding both the seal of Treasure Mountain and the Duanyan sword. With the ring in his hand, Jian Shen looked into the space ring only to find both the seal of Treasure Mountain and the Duanyan sword still stored inside. They had not been taken just yet. Jian Shen could barely hide his joy at this. He knew that the third elder of the Shi family had a method of finding their clan's ruler armament, but the space ring had managed to avoid detection within the Huangpu clan for days. Something like this was a joyous occasion to celebrate. On the way here, Jian Shen was worried that the hidden space ring would have been discovered, but now that he was here, those worries were completely superfluous. Letting out a sigh in relief, a happy smile appeared on Jian Shen's face. He slowly closed his eyes, and in 2 breaths' time, the well within the Huangpu clan compound exploded as a purple and gold box flew through the air. Then, as if attracted by a mysterious power, it flew straight to Jian Shen's hand. Opening up the box, Jian could see the silver space ring tucked away inside. With the other space ring still in his hand, he took that other space ring and threw it into the second one along with the box and left. Not too long after Jian left, a group of nervous people quickly scrambled over to where Jian was. Among the crowd was the master of the Huangpu clan. But Jian had already left the area. Even after searching for a moment, the master of the clan could do nothing else but give up. Flying through the air, Jian quickly made his way out of Mingyang City. On the way, countless people looked up at the sky with expressions of amazement and wonder, but Jian didn't stay around long enough to see. His first priority was to find the whereabouts of the white tiger and to ensure that it wasn't in any danger. In midair, Jian took out the white patches of fur given to him by Rum Guinness. This patch of fur had a special way of finding where Rum Guinness was as well as where the white tiger was. After following the directions Rum Guinness had told him with the white tiger cub's fur, it began to straighten up before curving at the edges as if pointing Jian in a specific direction like a compass. Jian looked in the direction where the fur was pointing only to discover it was where he had just come from. Did the white tiger cub run off to the mountain range? Jian thought. The mountain range in question was connected to Cross Mountains and contained one of the kings, which was the white tiger cub's enemy. If the white tiger cub were to fall into the king's paws, then it would be over for the cub. Crap, I hope the cub hasn't been discovered by the king of Cross Mountains. With a serious expression and no hesitation at all, he flew off in the direction the fur pointed. 4 hours later, Jian had deviated from the path back to Longevity Valley and was instead headed toward Cross Mountains a good distance away. As he flew closer and closer to Cross Mountains, Jian's face began to grow more and more unsightly. He could practically confirm that the white tiger cub was most likely in Cross Mountains. Slowing down, Jian floated in midair as he started to think. If the white tiger cub was found by the king of Cross Mountains, he was doing nothing but charging toward his death. Suddenly, Elder Xiu's image appeared in Jian's mind, almost as if he was giving Jian a rope to save his life. Could Elder Xiu be of help here? Jian thought as he began to calculate things. Elder Xiu's cultivation was immeasurably deep. He could possibly be the only one that could withstand the might of the Gilligan clan. But then again, Elder Xiu had grown weary of mortal conflicts and preferred to keep to his isolated days. Jian didn't wish to bring Elder Xiu into his affairs for his own personal interests as well. After all, the Gilligan clan of Cross Mountains was a huge power. He didn't wish to add to Elder Xiu's troubles by having him help accomplish an unknown task. After floating in the air with some doubt, Jian bit his lip and flew in the direction of the white tiger cub. At this moment he wasn't able to tell if the tiger cub was captured or not. If the tiger cub had been taken by a weaker magical beast, there was still a chance. Like a compass, the white tiger fur led Jian in the same direction for 2 hours. Finally, Jian arrived at one of the mountain peaks and began to look down at the scenery. By now, Jian was nearing the border to Cross Mountains. Underneath him, a group of spirit apes were gathered nearby. Standing on top of the tall trees, they gnashed their teeth as they howled at the floating Jian. Jian looked at the fur in his hand. From this, he could tell that the white tiger was somewhere nearby. After putting the fur away, he began to scour the ground below. He confirmed that he was already deeply entrenched within a nest of spirit apes with an innumerable amount of them standing nearby with even more rushing to the area. Even more so, there was also the scent of several other Class 5 magical beasts. If he wasn't flying, then he would have been surrounded by the apes a long time ago. Suddenly, several golden figures could be seen flying through the air. There were 5, 3-meter-tall golden spirit apes that were surrounding Jian. Each one of them had a ferocious glare that boded nothing well for Jian. Jian began to grow serious now. He had been underestimating the spirit apes before, but he hadn't thought that there would be a Class 6 spirit ape, let alone 5 of them. Now that there were 5 Class 6 spirit apes, Jian didn't dare be careless anymore. With his mind, countless of tree leaves began to launch into the sky from the forest below. Then, with an azure and violet glow, they flew around Jian Chen's side as a sort of protective layering. This strange display of magic stunned the 5 Class 6 spirit apes, but one of the spirit apes narrowed his eyes and roared. Then, he began to charge at Jian Chen with his fists raised high in the air. Immediately, the tree leaves that were flying around Jian Chen transformed to become 2 swords that were used to slash at the spirit ape. Bang! As the 2 sides struck each other, a loud bang could be heard. The swords made from tree leaves were blown apart by the spirit ape's fist, but the fist had 2 conspicuous-looking wounds. Even blood could be seen flowing down from it. Seeing how the hand of the spirit ape was bleeding, the other spirit apes were stunned. Each one looked at the human with astonished eyes as if trying to understand how the inexplicably weak tree leaves had managed to become so sharp. Zhi. One of the spirit apes let out an indistinguishable sound, but it was apparently in order as the other 4 spirit apes brandished their fists and flew in to attack him. Jian Chen's eyes flashed with the 2 colors as he began to control the leaves flying around him. In an instant, they formed into 10 swords and shot toward the 5 spirit apes. Another explosive bang rang through the air as the spirit apes attacked the swords. Like before, their fists gained new deep scars. But instead of stopping to wonder, the Class 6 spirit apes continued to fly at Jian Chen and tried to attack him with a rippling amount of energy. Hurtling their fists through the air, they tried to block any of Jian Chen's escape paths. Both of Jian Chen's hands were empty now. As he floated in midair, the tree leaves began to glow brightly with the azure and violet sword chi before flying toward the 5 spirit apes like a moth to a flame. Knowing just how strong this sword chi was now, the fists of the spirit apes began to ripple with even more power before at last, there was a golden glow to their fists that made them invulnerable. Then, with those fists, they struck out at the tree leaves. But because of the sheer amount of tree leaves that covered the sky, almost every inch, the 5 spirits apes weren't able to defuse them all. Many of the tree leaves began to shoot into their skin, breaking through their rather strong fur. Jetting into their bodies, they left scar after scar, dyeing their entire body red with blood. In a flash, their golden skin was more crimson than gold. Zitsitizi. The 5 spirit apes began to howl in panic and pain before they utilized the earth-attributed energy they had to form outside of their bodies as a secondary form of earthen armor. The usage of the earth-attributed energy would form an incredibly strong defensive armor. Even when the azure and violet sword chi-infused leaves shot into it, all they did was leave a scar behind. They were not able to break through the armor. Taking an opportunity to retreat, he flew away from the enclosure the spirit apes had trapped him in. Then, pushing his empty hands, a dozen of the trees below exploded into wooden shrapnel. Transforming into a flood of wood, they flew into the air and in an instant, they flew toward the spirit apes relentlessly. But with the armor, the spirit apes didn't even bother to take notice of the wood flood. Brandishing their fists, they chased Jian Chen with a reluctance to give up. Continuing to fly backward, Jian Chen watched as the wood flood he had created surrounded the apes. Covering the entire sky for them, the shrapnel began to shoot straight into the spirit apes mercilessly. Suffering from such an intensive attack, the armors of the spirit apes were riddled with holes and were smashed apart an instant later. Another surge of energy rippled from their body, but it was quickly battered down by Jian Chen's attack, forced to break apart once again. But disregarding this, the spirit apes continued to chase down Jian Chen. Jian Chen's eyes flashed brightly with color as he lifted his right hand up. A single blade of pure sword chi began to form as Jian Chen began to use the origin energy for the sword spirits. While his normal attacks were able to injure the Class 6 magical beasts, they were unable to land a killing blow. If he wanted to heavily injure the Class 6 magical beasts, he would need to use the sword spirits. Chapter 382, Summoning of the Ape King. Wielding the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits, even the Class 6 spirit apes were able to feel Jian Chen's might. Instead of running away, they continued to inch closer toward him with equally serious expressions. With their fists flying through the air, the space around them began to distort from the energy. By now, both of Jian Chen's eyes were completely lit with two different colors. The left eye was violet and the other azure. A sight like this was especially frightening and made him seem like a demon in disguise. The origin energy was like a beam of light in Jian Chen's hand that continued to expel a sharp amount of sword qi into the sky around it. In moments, it was almost as if the entire area was fully consumed by it. Following an azure and violet swish of light, the origin energy from the sword spirits painted the entire area a splendid light as it stabbed at the spirit apes. Kacha. 5 separate cracks could be heard as the energy surrounding the 5 spirit apes' fists all shattered. Following a cleaving light from the sword spirits, a wound could be seen on each of the fists. The cut was so severe that it went straight past the bone and felt as if it had nearly cut their hand in two. Gigi. The intense pain caused each of the apes to shriek before gnashing their teeth together as they looked at their nearly bisected hands. Instead of being afraid, however, their innate berserk nature began to swell out of them, causing the fierce glint in their eyes to multiply as they glared dangerously at Jian Chen. Zitzidis Hizi. One of the spirit apes began to cry out loud in the language known only to spirit apes as a way to communicate. After hearing the first spirit ape, the other 4 apes looked as if they were hesitating. However, they gnawed at their teeth and surrounded the first ape. With their swaying bodies, energy began to pour out before shooting straight to the first ape. Jian Chen continued to watch this strange sight with a confused look. The 5 spirit apes had some sort of strange technique where 4 spirit apes could convene their energy to the one in the middle. If this went on, then the spirit ape standing in the middle would have the strength of 5 class 6 spirit apes. With such a strong concentration of power like that, just how strong would the middle one become? A flash of murderous intent could be seen in Jian Chen's mind. There was no way he could allow for the spirit apes to continue with this activity. In the case that whatever they were doing was finished, he would be up against an extremely terrifying opponent that would definitely prove troublesome. Just as Jian Chen was about to attack the spirit apes to prevent anything from happening, an elderly voice suddenly called out from nowhere. "Halt, just what sort of reception is this to a guest? Wise spirit, abundant spirit, golden spirit, kind spirit, clean spirit, hurry up and receive the guest properly, do not idle about." This elderly voice contained awe-inspiring power in his voice. At the same time, it was impossible for Jian Chen to pinpoint where this voice was coming from. Although the sudden voice had thrown off Jian Chen's plan to attack the spirit apes, Jian Chen was still looking around him seriously. It was finally after seeing nothing unusual that he began to use his omnipresence to look around the area. But when Jian Chen's omnipresence reached one of the mountain peaks, a transparent barrier blocked its path, rendering him unable to sense what was past it. Jian Chen blanched as the thought of retreating came into his mind. In order to be able to put up a barrier like this, one would need to be able to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world, meaning a saint ruler or higher. For this unknown entity to be able to put up a barrier and make his voice unable to be pinpointed, this entity would most likely have to be no weaker than a saint ruler. Although the origin energy from the sword spirits was strong enough to deal with class 6 magical beasts or heaven saint masters, it was completely useless against a saint ruler. When the elderly voice had rang out, the 5 spirit apes had stopped their movements. However, they continued to glare at Jian Chen angrily as if he was their most hated enemy. There was a conflicted look on Jian Chen's face. He didn't know whether or not he should stay or run, but if a saint ruler had really wanted to be his opponent, running would be useless. The only comforting thought was that there was no hostility in the elder's voice, so Jian Chen could let out a sigh of relief. Wise spirit, abundant spirit, golden spirit, kind spirit, clean spirit, hurry up and receive the guest, do not idle about. The elderly voice could be heard once more without any more hints on where it was coming from. Gigi. The 5 spirit apes responded to the call with a respectful bow toward one of the mountain peaks. Then, with a mutual glance to each other, they beckoned Jian Chen unwillingly. Jian Chen didn't say a word and instead gave a small smile before flying toward the highest mountain peak with the bloody spirit apes following from behind. Each were still biting their teeth as if they hadn't forgotten about their animosity with Jian Chen. Not too long later, Jian Shen arrived at the tallest mountain peak. On this peak, there was a single barrier that seemed to cover the entire mountain peak. Suddenly, a small crack appeared within the barrier without a sound. It continued to expand before finally growing to a size large enough for a human to enter. "Human, enter. I wish to speak to you." The voice spoke once more. But this time, Jian Shen could hear it coming from the mountain peak. Jian Shen hesitated for a moment, but he continued to fly inside. The spirit apes followed close behind and continued to bow toward the mountain peak respectfully. Quickly spotting a gigantic cave in the mountain peak, Jian Shen could see several words written in human language over the cave, "Cave of the Ape King." Along with the spirit apes, Jian Shen entered the cave. The cave of the Ape King was well lit, so not a single area of the cave was left untouched. The passageway through the cave was so extensive that Jian Shen had walked for 100 meters through the wide areas before finally coming to the belly of the mountain. There were plenty of curious plants that had sweet fragrances. These fragrances had a miraculous effect that made anyone feel happy as well as removing any feelings of anger. Aside from the strange plants in the cave, there was a simple arrangement of furniture. Only a jade table and bed could be seen. From the luster of both, it wasn't hard to see that both items were very expensive. On the jade bed, a grizzly-haired elderly man sat cross-legged with plenty of wrinkles on his face so that it was hard to distinguish his facial characteristics. By his side, there was a single white, winged tiger cub sleeping peacefully. Compared to the white tiger days ago, the white tiger cub was much larger than before and now measured nearly a meter long. Upon seeing the white tiger cub, Jian Shen had a look of utter surprise on his face. When he realized just what place he was in, a feeling of pressure could be felt once more. The 5 spirit apes quickly came to the elderly man's side and knelt down respectfully before speaking in gibberish that Jian Shen assumed to be monkey speak. The cross-legged elder looked at the 5 spirit apes with a calm eye. "You were all too unruly. The human in front of us is a guest, just how could you receive him in such a way? Hurry up and apologize." "Zitsatizi." The spirit apes immediately cried out in dissatisfaction as if trying to justify themselves. "Not all humans are our enemies. This one in front of us is a guest of the spirit apes. Hurry up and apologize." The elder stressed with a tone of finality. The 5 spirit apes hung their heads in dejected defeat before crying out to Jian Shen unwillingly. At the same time, they bowed their bodies as form of apology to him. Right now, Jian Shen could only tell that the man had no hostility aimed toward himself. With a smile, he cupped his hands together. "This was a misunderstanding from my own carelessness. If it were not for my recklessness, this would not have happened. Allow me to apologize as well. You 5 may go." The elder spoke to the spirit apes. The 5 spirit apes bowed toward the elder once more before shooting a quick indignant glares at Jian Shen as they left the cave. As soon as the spirit apes left, the elder stood up from the bed and sat down at the table's side instead. "Human, come sit." "I give my thanks, Ape King." Jian Shen cupped his hands before sitting opposite of him. With a deep look, the elder began to size up Jian Shen for a moment before sighing in admiration. "It is no wonder Rum Guinness holds you in high praise. You stand out from the rest, even with your blood-stained hands. You hold a righteous spirit. For Rum Guinness to entrust her child to you, that is a sensible choice." Jian Shen's heart skipped a beat. "Senior, do you know Rum Guinness?" The elder smiled. "You may call me Ape King. The appellations you humans use is something I am not accustomed to." The elder grew grieved after that, however. With a long sigh, he spoke. "Rum Guinness, her husband, and I were all elders of the Gilligan clan for over 1,000 years. We grew as close as family, and when they came across trouble, I knew it was in regards to their child." Chapter 383, 100 Grass Wine. After hearing what the Ape King said, Jian Shen couldn't help but feel shocked. He hadn't thought that the Ape King would have been an elder for the Gilligan clan. But after hearing that he and Rum Guinness were good friends, he felt at ease with himself. At the very least, he knew that the Ape King wouldn't report the white tiger cub's whereabouts to the king of the Gilligan clan. For the currently pitiful white tiger cub, this was a good sign. The Ape King continued to speak. Since Rum Guinness entrusted her child to you, I can presume that she has told you about the child being a heavenly tiger god as well as the associated dangers with it. Jian Shen nodded his head without speaking a word. Human, for you to come into Cross Mountains despite the dangers, I can admire your valor. Rum Guinness did not find the wrong person to trust. The Ape King spoke with appreciation. Senior Ape King flatters this one too much. This one was luckily prepared for this situation, that's all. Jian Shen tried to sound as modest as possible. The Ape King knew that Jian Shen was trying to sound polite, and so he smiled. Human, you are a strong one with a strange power. I have never seen another human like you. Rum Guinness child will not befall any danger by traveling with you. You must bear in mind to never divulge the fact that the child is a heavenly tiger god, otherwise, it will be very problematic for you. You needn't worry about the child's wings. There are many magical beasts under the heavens, many of them have wings. Aside from Class 7 magical beasts, other beasts will not know that this child has the special blood of a heavenly tiger god running through its veins. So hiding this fact from the human world would also be a wise choice to make. Most importantly, you must never allow a Class 7 magical beast to know about it. Senior Ape King, could the tiger cub not stay with you? With how vast the Cross Mountains are, the king of the Gilligan clan would surely not be able to find the cub here. With your strength, this would be no major task? Jian Shen asked. Right now he was still in danger from the Shi and Jie clan. Both families held a great deal of strength and could be considered one of the top families on the continent. The tiger cub would not be safe at his side, and Jian Shen only wished for the tiger cub to grow up strong without any sufferings. It had suffered enough already. The Ape King shook his head instantly before speaking with a decisive tone, definitely not. You do not understand the situation Cross Mountains are in with the Gilligan clan. Although the territory of the spirit apes is at the border of Cross Mountains, which is some distance away from the Gilligan clan, it isn't safe for the heavenly tiger god to stay within this place for too long. Even our spirit apes clan would be burnt to the ground if news were to spread. Jian Shen grew deathly serious as he began to think, is that right? Then the only option is for me to take the tiger cub away. The child would be safest traveling the human world by your side. While the Gilligan clan is admittedly strong, even the elders would not dare step into the human territory without permission. Letting the heavenly tiger god stay in the human world would at the very least avoid persecution from the Gilligan clan. A Class 7 magical beast can transform into a human form. If the king of the Gilligan clan were to transform into a human and infiltrate our world, then wouldn't he be undetectable? Jian Shen asked with worry. The Ape King laughed and replied, you needn't worry. We have an agreement with the strong ones of the human world. Unless there is approval from both sides, neither Saint Ruler can enter the other side or they risk being punished by two separate punishments. Ah, so there was something like that? I am relieved. Jian Shen's brows furrowed. This was an interesting piece of information. The Ape King continued to smile brightly. Human, you have not told me your name yet. Senior Ape King, I am called Jian Shen. Jian Shen cupped his hands together respectfully. Jian Shen. The Ape King tested the name out as if he was trying to commit the name to memory before slowly extending his right hand. From a space ring, he took out 2 jade bottles and a carefully engraved wine bottle. Jian Shen, this is the specialty of us spirit apes, the 100-grass wine. Using the treasures in the Cross Mountains, I was able to ferment it for over 1,000 years and I am loath to drink even a single sip. Since you are Rum Guinness' friend and not an outsider, I'll permit you to sample the wine created by us spirit apes. With that, the Ape King twisted the lid off and poured out a green liquid from within. Immediately, a sweet-smelling fragrance permeated the entire cave so that both Jian Shen and the Ape King could smell it. The Ape King extended a cup of the 100-grass wine toward Jian Shen. This is a priceless treasure that cannot be bought anywhere and contains a majestic amount of qi. It isn't some minor drink with minor effects, its best use is for helping a person think concisely. Help think concisely. Jian Chen immediately grew happy. To be able to have such an effect like this was something he desperately wanted to help impact his strength for the better. The Ape King was seemingly pleased with Jian Chen's thunderstruck expression. Is it not shocking? The most common 100-grass wine would usually only be able to help a person increase their saint force, meaning anyone under the Heaven Saint Master realm for you humans would be able to use it. But the 100-grass wine in my possession is a once-in-a-thousand-year item. It is far different than what a normal 100-grass wine is like. Even if a saint ruler from the human world were to take a sip, they would feel the benefit straight away. Without hesitation, Jian Chen gave a hasty thanks before hurriedly drinking down the wine. Jian Chen could only feel a rising sensation make its way through his body. The very instant the wine reached his stomach, it transformed into vital energy. However, because his saint weapon had been destroyed, the vital energy was unable to be absorbed and slowly began to disappear. At the same time, an azure glow of light began to rise from Jian Chen's dantian before entering his forehead and then ultimately blending with Jian Chen's thoughts. A beautiful sensation occurred in Jian Chen's mind as he felt his spirit become unbelievably comfortable. There was a pleasure that could be felt almost as if he had transcended on becoming an immortal, causing him to cry out in joy. Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes and allowed his spirit to enjoy the pleasantness. While he was comfortable, his thoughts had begun to condense in a way that even the sword spirits were benefiting from, as shown from the lively thoughts being transmitted. After a while, the joyous feeling finally began to recede, causing Jian Chen to open his eyes. At this moment, he could sense that in such a short amount of time, his thoughts had already soared to an unprecedented degree. This caused Jian Chen to nearly jump with joy. The 100-grass wine within the possession of the Ape King was truly too amazing. Afterward, Jian Chen's eyes began to glow with a fiery expression. The 100-grass wine had given him an excellent boost in strength, if only he could have another cup. Momentarily, Jian Chen's look toward the Ape King had changed. Seeing the glint in Jian Chen's eyes, the Ape King's eye twitched before collecting the 100-grass wine back into the bottle with a displeased look. Do not even think about my 100-grass wine. I've aged this wine for over 1,000 years in order for it to have such an effect. However much you get is however much you drink. I myself only have so much. If this was some ordinary wine, then I would gladly give you more. Upon hearing the Ape King's words, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel embarrassed, that is. Senior Ape King, this 100-grass wine has given me a tremendous boost, see? Out of the question. The Ape King waved his hand with no hesitation. It was only for the face of rum Guinness that I served you a cup. How could you not know contentment? The Ape King treated the 100-grass wine like treasure, so there was no way he would give Jian Chen any more. Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before taking out a fist-sized seal from within his space ring. Senior Ape King, why don't I make an offer for your 100-grass wine? Jian Chen was nearly drooling at the mouth for the wine since it was a great boon to him. For the sake of his strength, he desperately wanted the item. Definitely not, no trade. The Ape King replied without decay. But when he suddenly cast an eye over the item on the table, he immediately let out a stunned look. This is. Senior Ape King, I presume you recognize what this is and know of its worth. If I were to give you this for a bottle of 100-grass wine, would you be willing? Jian Chen let out a confident smile. The item he had pulled out just now was the ruler armament seal of Treasure Mountain. Ruler armaments were extremely precious, but they were of no use to Jian Chen. Furthermore, the seal of Treasure Mountain required the use of the blood of the Shi family in order to be used. In his hands, it was useless and could be tracked down by the Shi family. An item like this was a time bomb to Jian Chen and could reveal Jian Chen's position at any given time. If he were to throw it away, it would be a pity, so rather than that, he might as well trade it away for an item that would serve a better use for him. This is a ruler armament. Where did you come across such an item? The Ape King spoke with a serious look. I took it. Jian Chen spoke honestly. The Ape King's eyes blinked twice as he looked at Jian Chen in utter disbelief. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke gravely, families who are in possession of ruler armaments are not easy to deal with. Jian Chen, you may have invited trouble upon your head. Chapter 384. Leaving the cave of the Ape King, Jian Chen declined to respond to the Ape King's warning and instead replied with a smile, I know. The Ape King stared deeply at Jian Chen with a serious gaze before saying, any family with a ruler armament is a family with power. A person traveling alone with the heavenly tiger god will surely come across many unforeseen events. Senior Ape King, there is a reason why we have the expression, counter soldiers with arms, and water with an earth weir. The situation has already come, but there is no use mentioning that now. Although the family in question is very strong, the Tian Yuan continent is massive, so they will not be able to find me easily. Jian Chen spoke without fear. I indeed hope that way. I only wish for the child of Rum Guinness to stay safe from any wrongful harm. The Ape King sighed before taking out a bottle. With a pained face, he gave it to Jian Chen. For the child of Rum Guinness, I will part myself from one of my treasures. This bottle of 100-grass wine is for you. I hope that you will be able to improve yourself. This way, you will be able to properly protect the heavenly tiger god. Many thanks, Senior Ape King. Jian Chen cried out in joy before quickly putting the bottle into his space ring as if afraid that the Ape King would change his mind. Senior Ape King, then this ruler armament will be given to you in exchange for the 100-grass wine. Taking the bottle, Jian Chen pushed the seal of Treasure Mountain toward the Ape King. The Ape King cast an eye at the item for a moment before speaking, the ruler armaments of you humans serve no use for me. Take it with you. If you come across a method to use it, then the ruler armament will be of use to you. Hearing that, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before taking the seal of Treasure Mountain back. The growth of a heavenly tiger god is excruciatingly slow. They must consume a large amount of heavenly resources in order to grow. Since I have spent many years collecting every type of said resource and Rum Guinness is my dear friend, I shall bequeath them to her child for the sake of growing faster. Waving his hand, several heavenly resources began to fill the table. 1,000-year ginseng, spirit mushrooms, knotweed, dragon's tongue grass, core plant, 100-year-old spirit root and so on. All sorts of ingredients that Jian Chen had never seen before appeared on the table. These items were all being given to the tiger cub, so Jian Chen did not decline any of them. With a word of thanks, Jian Chen began to collect the heavenly resources. The Ape King spoke once more, stay for a while. I will be feeding the resources to the heavenly tiger god in the meantime. The child is in a sleep to digest them right now. We shall see if there are any changes later. When the child wakes, you may take him and leave. After that, the Ape King ignored Jian Chen and sat back on his bed. Closing his eyes, he descended into a calm meditative sleep. The belly of the cave had become deathly quiet. In his boredom, Jian Chen walked around the cave observing the strange plants being cultivated. After waiting for 6 hours, the tiger cub finally awoke. Both of its bright eyes began to flicker open and immediately took notice of Jian Chen, who was standing not too far away. Upon seeing Jian Chen, the white tiger cub was stunned. Afterward, it began to cry out happily before leaping from the bed toward Jian Chen. Hearing the tiger cub's cry, Jian Chen's face lit up in happiness before turning around just in time to see a white streak of light shooting toward his chest. Catching the cub in both hands, the tiger cub knocked against Jian Chen's torso with enough force that Jian Chen had to take several steps back. The white tiger cub was exceedingly happy and continued to purr into Jian Chen's chest as it rubbed its head against Jian Chen's chin. Its tongue licked at Jian Chen without stop in a clear indication of its joy. After the events of the past few days, the white tiger had begun to dote upon Jian Chen a lot more. Jian Chen smiled as he looked at the tiger cub. He could clearly tell that the tiger cub had grown heavier and even bigger since the last time he saw it. All 4 of the paws of the cub had already grown to be incredibly sharp, and even its fangs were terrifying to look at. Jian Chen, take the heavenly tiger god and leave this place. The child cannot stay here for too long. The Ape King's voice could be heard. Opening his eyes, he smiled in the direction of the white tiger with an affectionate expression. Yes, Senior Ape King, this one will be leaving then, farewell. Jianshen spoke to the Ape King before leading the tiger cub away. The white tiger cub seemed to have realized that they were leaving and swung both of its reluctant eyes toward the Ape King before waving a paw at him in farewell. Leaving the cave, the outside world was already quite dark with the bright moon shining down on the ground below. The night was extraordinarily beautiful with moonlight shining everywhere. Even an unruly child would be stunned by the beauty and would be fascinated by the shine. The Ape King had given no farewell. Jianshen carried the tiger cub on his chest and began to fly into the sky. Leaving the mountain peak, he came across the barrier and slipped past it without a sound. After leaving the barrier, Jianshen refused to stick around any longer and flew toward Longevity Valley. The tiger cub was extremely curious on how they were flying and clutched at Jianshen's arms tightly. Its eyes shined brightly with pure curiosity as it twisted and turned its head around. Staying snugly within Jianshen's arms, it continued to enjoy the view with an adorable expression on its face. By the time Jianshen returned to Longevity Valley, it was already nearly daytime. By then, the village was already bustling about. Jianshen didn't return to the village just yet and instead descended within the valley and walked the rest of the way with the tiger cub by his side. Hey, Jianshen, you're finally back. Did you bring me anything good to eat? Little Fatty walked to meet him from some distance away. The moment he saw the tiger by Jianshen's side, he cried out with an astonished look, Jianshen, where did you find this magical beast? It has wings, so does that mean it'll be able to fly when it grows up? Jianshen nodded his head. This magical beast was found by me in the forest. What do you think? Is it cute? Jianshen remembered the Ape King's words and said nothing to divulge the tiger cub's identity. Jianshen and Little Fatty continued to laugh and banter with each other as they returned to the village. On the way, several villagers called out to Jianshen in greeting. Jianshen's ability to fly was already known by everyone. He was able to become a Heaven Saint Master at such a young age and thus had earned the respect of the entire village. When Jianshen returned to the house, Elder Xiao and Xiaomi both came in with their hoes perched on their shoulders at the same time. Ah, Jianshen, what's that you brought with you? Xiaomi glanced at the white tiger cub with a strange look. Laughing, Jianshen spoke, Uncle Xiaomi, this is a magical beast I found while I was outside the valley. Little beast? What little beast? This place has a hierarchy of grade. Is this a low-level magical beast? Xiaomi spoke with curiosity. Upon hearing low-level magical beast, the tiger cub seemed as if it was displeased. Holding its head up high from Jianshen's embrace, the tiger cub revealed the sharp fangs it had as it gave off a king-like aura towards Xiaomi. The reaction of the tiger cub caused Xiaomi to look surprised. Sizing up the cub, he looked at the wings on its back with a startled look before turning back to his father. Father, you are the knowledgeable one here. Have you ever seen such a magical beast? This one doesn't seem to be a low-level beast. Elder Xiao remained silent as he stared deeply at the tiger cub. In the end, when he looked at the wings on the tiger's back, his eyebrows furrowed together as he revealed a ponderous expression. Jianshen had a faint smile on his face as he looked at Elder Xiao. He wasn't worried if the identity of the tiger cub was known to Elder Xiao since only a Class 7 magical beast would know of the true identity that ran through the cub's veins. No humans would know of the true identity since a heavenly tiger god was not seen since the ancient past. Even if Jianshen mentioned its name, very few people would know about it. That was because it had been far too long. The last time it had been seen was during the time of Mo Tianyun. Seeing how Elder Xiao had been silent for a long time, Xiaomi asked once more with shock, Father, could it be that even you don't know the tiger's history? Ignoring Xiaomi, the elder continued to look at the tiger's wings with narrowed eyes. In that moment, his body began to shake as if he had suddenly thought about something unbelievable and was overwhelmed with shock because of it. Seeing the elder's reaction, Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. Don't tell me he figured it out. Chapter 385. Pressure. Elder Xiao had a shocked expression as his eyes stared at the tiger in Jian Chen's hands. A look of utter disbelief could be seen. Father, what's wrong? Xiaomi was speechless at the sudden change in the elder's expression. This was the very first time he had ever seen his father in such a state. Elder Xiao continued to ignore Xiaomi as his eyes became more and more frosty. Carefully analyzing the tiger cub in Jian Chen's hands even more, his eyes seemed as if they could clearly see every single detail on the tiger. With the elder's stare being a tad bit frightening and the cub still quite young, it had begun to feel intimidated by the elder. The cub's petite body tried to burrow deeper into Jian Chen's arms as if trying to hide from the elder like it was scared. Elder Xiao, what are you doing? Jian Chen was beginning to grow nervous. He didn't know just what to think from the elder's actions. Had he really seen through the tiger's identity? The Ape King had told him before that a human shouldn't know of the true identity of a heavenly tiger god. Elder Xiao let out a long breath of air as the cold glint in his eyes began to recede. In a flash he had reverted back to his original expression with just a small complicated look as he turned to Jian Chen. Jian Chen, talk to me honestly. This magical beast you found, was it really found in the forest? Elder Xiao, could it be you know of this tiger's background? Jian Chen stared at the elder with an astonished look. The elder sighed once more before looking to little fatty, go and plow the fields. Yes, grandfather. Fatty replied before giving both Jian Chen and the white tiger a curious look. But in the end, he went out to the fields to do as his grandfather asked. After little fatty had left, Elder Xiao looked at Jian Chen and Xiaomi, you two follow me. Turning about, the elder walked into one of the rooms of the house. Xiaomi could feel that the situation had grown serious and cast a deep glance toward the tiger cub before following his father into one of the rooms nervously. Jian Chen stroked the head of the cub gently before following after the elder. This was the personal room of Elder Xiao. It was only 10 square meters, and the furniture was arranged in a simplistic manner. There was only a bed and wardrobe in the room and a small pile of objects in a corner. Aside from this, there was nothing else. The moment Jian Chen entered the room, a faint but transparent barrier enshrouded the entire room. Upon seeing the sudden activation of the barrier, Xiaomi had a startled look. Father, what is the meaning of this? What has made you so cautious to create a barrier? Jian Chen's face grew deathly serious as well as he stepped forward. No matter if he could believe it or not, one thing was certain, Elder Xiao had definitely figured out the matter behind the heavenly tiger god. Elder Xiao ignored Xiaomi once more and stared deeply at Jian Chen. Jian Chen, speak the truth. Where did you come across this cub? Elder Xiao, do you know of the tiger cub's identity? Jian Chen listened carefully for confirmation. Elder Xiao's eyes latched onto the tiger cub and spoke, if my guess is not wrong, then this cub is the heavenly tiger god that has appeared several times in the ancient past. Jian Chen was startled at the elder's confirmation. Although he had guessed that the elder knew, hearing the elder personally confirm it still caused his heart to start beating irregularly. Jian Chen, it seems that you are aware of what a heavenly tiger god is. The elder looked at Jian Chen with a solemn gaze. That is correct, I know of the heavenly tiger god. It was only now that Jian Chen decided not to hide it. He then began to regale his tale of rum Guinness and what he was entrusted with. After listening to Jian Chen's story, the elder had descended into a quiet calm that was filled with thought. Jian Chen didn't make a sound in fear of breaking the elder's train of thought. Xiaomi continued to stand some distance away in complete shock at Jian Chen and the tiger cub he was carrying. He couldn't believe that the cub would unexpectedly have a mysterious background that was far beyond what he could even imagine. After a while, the elder finally sighed. The appearance of a heavenly tiger god is something that should come as a blessing to the magical beast clans. If they are able to exploit this blessing, then they would be able to lay claim to a heavenly tiger god of the past. In that case, the magical beast clans would have a monstrous amount of power against the human world. Jianshen, this heavenly tiger god you have may very well bring catastrophe to our human world. Hearing this, Jianshen turned pale with fright from what the elder said. Could he possibly want to eliminate the tiger cub here and now in order to avoid any future trouble? That should be unlikely, Elder Shou. This tiger cub is very obedient. And with the current circumstances, I'm afraid that it'll remain within the human world for now. With time the cub will become partial to the human world and wouldn't be used against us. Furthermore, the cub's father was killed by the king of the Gilligan clan while the mother was seriously injured. When the cub matures, it will want to take revenge on the clan and not against humans. Jianshen tried to explain in a hurry. If the elder wanted to kill the cub, then Jianshen would have no chance of protecting it. The elder nodded his head with a thoughtful look. Your words have merit to them. Even if the heavenly tiger god will not prove to be a danger to humanity, it would still be a disaster if it were to travel by your side. Elder Shou didn't let Jianshen speak another word and continued to speak. This situation isn't as simple as you may think. The king of the Gilligan clan wouldn't try to kill the heavenly tiger god for no reason. That is because a heavenly tiger god is no small amount of power. With one, their fighting strength would soar to an unbelievable degree. Elder Shou's words left Jianshen at a loss on what to do. Sighing, the elder spoke. Jianshen, the heavenly tiger god's life could be in danger at any moment. You must rear it as quickly as possible. It is only when its strength reaches a sufficient degree that danger might be mitigated. Elder Shou, could there be some other secret in this matter? Jianshen asked. The elder didn't respond to Jianshen's question and merely replied, Jianshen, you should go. Remember, raise the heavenly tiger god as soon as possible. Finally, there was a single crack in the normally impassive tone. Jianshen looked at the elder with a curious eye for some time. Finally sighing, Jianshen took the cub and left the room with doubt still in his eyes. For Elder Shou to want me to raise the tiger cub as fast as possible, it seems that there is still something I don't know. Did Rum Guinness not tell me, or is this something even she doesn't know about? After Jianshen left, Elder Shou took out a blood-red token and handed it to Show me, take this spirit token and go straight to the Bloodsword sect. Tell the entire intelligence organization to mobilize everyone. Watch closely for anything that happens, and if there is any extremely strong experts that appear within the Tianyuan continent, report to me straight away. Father, didn't you say that you would never use the Bloodsword sect? Why are you? Show me asked with a startled look. The situation has become far too grave. Don't ask any questions and take my token to the Bloodsword sect straight away. Elder Shou interjected solemnly. His expression was dark and no longer looked like a simple farmer. Right now, he looked more like the valiant hero giving commands to his entire army. Yes, your child will go now. Xiaomi didn't speak anymore and flew away with the token. After Xiaomi had left, the elder sighed before walking to his bed. They are growing far too bold if they would dare to kill even a heavenly tiger god. When the time comes and the heavenly tiger cub fully matures, their judgment will come. But they will try and infiltrate the human world in order to assassinate it soon enough. Forget it, it has nothing to do with me. If they truly come, then some other family will come to protect it. After leaving the elder's room, Jianshen took the cub to his own room to rest. Then placing the cub on his bed, he began to caress the cub's ears and head. Mr. R. Closing its eyes in comfortable bliss, the tiger cub was fully content with being treated to Jianshen's care. Right now in its heart, it was very partial to Jianshen. Looking at the obedient tiger cub, Jianshen took out several of the 1,000-year ginseng from within his space ring. Little white tiger, take this and eat it, this way, you'll grow up faster. The little tiger sniffed at the item offered to him curiously. Upon sniffing the sweet fragrance, its eyes widened before purring happily and taking the items into its mouth, relishing the meal. After eating several stalks of the 1,000-year ginseng, the tiger cub had finally finished eating. Closing its eyes once more, it began to sleep on top of the bed. Jian knew that the cub was currently in the process of absorbing the spiritual qi in from its meal. Not wanting to bother the tiger, Jian climbed onto the bed himself and began to drink the 100-grass wine given to him by the Ape King. The 1,000-year-old 100-grass wine had a great effect in helping a person's mind. After Jian had finished off some of it, he closed his eyes in pure bliss as his soul enjoyed the pleasurable feeling. Feeling an azure light soar up from his dantian into his mind, Jian felt his mind suddenly explode with excitement. Even the sword spirits were feeling the benefits. With Jian mind soaring in strength, his omnipresence ability was also increasing by leaps and bounds. Right now, with his soul undergoing improvement, Jian felt as if he was being baptized and transcending to becoming an immortal. Chapter 386, Recovery of the Sword Spirits. A moment later, Jian awoke from the comfortable state he was in only to feel himself many times stronger than before. Without delay, Jian grabbed the bottle and began to chug it. This time, Jian swallowed a large amount of the wine, finishing off a good amount of it quickly. Soon after the last drop had been swallowed, he began to relish in the comfortable feeling once more. 2 hours later, Jian had finally absorbed the rest of the wine. At this moment, Jian ability with his thoughts had increased by another third. His omnipresence now allowed him to spread his senses to at least 13 kilometers. Jian was incomparably happy. Jian would have never believed that such a feat could be accomplished in such a short amount of time with his strength boosted and even his body had been affected. This 100-grass wine is truly a blessed item. Jian sighed in admiration before drinking even more of the bottle. In a flash, the wine bottle given to him by the Ape King only had a small portion left. Carefully sampling it, Jian closed his eyes and began to allow his mind to strengthen. The vital energy within the 100-grass wine continued to swirl around Jian dantian before quickly dissipating. The azure qi from the wine quickly soared up into Jian head before entering Jian consciousness. Within his consciousness, the sword spirits that were revolving around the multicolored stone pulsated with happiness as the light coming from them began to flicker. When the azure qi ascended into Jian consciousness, the spirit that Jian shared with the sword spirits benefited greatly. The weakened soul of the sword spirits began to grow stronger with the light around them growing richer in concentration. After an unknown amount of time, the 100-grass wine had been completely absorbed by Jian and his spirit felt complete bliss radiating through it. Suddenly, Jian felt a tremendous change that he had never felt before. Without even spreading his presence, he was able to detect the wind blowing on the grass 100 meters away. At this moment, Jian realized that his spirit had harmonized with the world. Without even needing to plan carefully, he had already entered a state of harmony with the world. He was able to clearly sense everything within 100 meters, almost like he could control everything. It was as if this area was his domain. Spreading out his omnipresence, Jian's senses had instantly covered the valley. All of the villagers currently working out in the fields could be seen like a painting within Jian's mind. Despite the actual distance between them, Jian could see their every movements down to the finest detail. All of the villagers had been taught how to cultivate by Xiaomi, so they had all been able to cultivate to a certain degree. Although the strongest ones weren't even a great saint master, the good majority of them were saints or just great saints. Some didn't care at all about cultivating and thus hadn't even condensed their saint force to form a saint weapon yet. Following that, Jian spread his presence out to the farming elder Xiao. Immediately, he could feel that elder Xiao was not a person, but rather the entire world fused into a person. Even as he brandished the hoe over and over again, all he could sense in elder Xiao was the immeasurable amount of profound mysteries of the world. Jian's omnipresence continued to spread until it reached 15 kilometers before he had finally hit his limit. After drinking the 100-grass wine, Jian's mind had improved by leaps and bounds. To him, this was certainly something to celebrate over. Master, master, suddenly deep within Jian's mind, he could hear a faint voice. Soon after, he felt just where the voice was coming from and was instantly shocked. Master, I can finally communicate with you. It was just then that Jian Chen could hear the inexplicable joy in the voice. You're the azure and violet sword spirits? Jian Chen spoke with a bit of a stammer. Master, I am Ziying, you may call me Xiao Zi. Spoke the Ziying sword spirit. Its voice sounded rather masculine and youthful. Master, I am Qingxua, you may call me Xiao Qing. Suddenly, another soft voice could be heard. This one was as pleasant sounding as a skylark. Jian Chen couldn't help but submerge himself into his consciousness. At that moment, within the chaotic space of his mind, the multicolored stone could no longer be seen floating around. In its place were two strange people. Both were around the age of 2, while one was a handsome male, the other was a beautiful female that complemented the male perfectly. The male had violet hair that seemed to droop all the way down to his chest. He wore a classic violet chongpao and had eyes that glowed with a curious violet shade. The female wore an azure cheongsam that suited her long azure hair quite nicely. Her appearance was unrivaled and her azure eyes would cause any male to choke up. Jian Chen's chest began to heave and his tongue started to stop working as he looked at the golden couple. It was finally with a stammer that he spoke. You two, are you two the sword spirits? Yes, master. I am Ziying, she is Qingxua. The violet-robed man spoke with a smile. Jian Chen was speechless. He knew about the situation regarding the sword spirits, but he still found it hard to believe that the sword spirits would unexpectedly gain a human form within his consciousness. After a moment, Jian Chen sucked in his breath and attempted to calm himself once more. Staring at the sword spirits, he spoke, I didn't think that we would met in such a manner. Has your energy been fully recovered? Ziying went silent for a moment before shaking his head. Master, we are still very weak. It is only because of the 100 grass wine that we were able to recover enough strength to take on physical forms and talk. Call me Jian Chen, not master. I am no master to you, we can just be fellow friends. Jian Chen grimaced at the word master. Master, when we entered your body, we submitted to you. You are the master of Ziying and Qingxua. Qingxua spoke with a pleasant sound. Qingxua's words had caused Jian Chen to think back to when he had originally died. It was after that moment that he was born in such an unfamiliar world. That's right, I can still remember when I died. Was it because of you two that I was reincarnated into this world? Hearing this, Qingxua and Ziying both looked at each other in silence before Ziying opened his mouth. Master, at that time it was indeed Qingxua and I that brought you to this planet. In the previous planet, you had suffered a tremendous wound and the qi of the world began to escape your body. If that continued, then you wouldn't have been able to make any improvements. At the very most, you would never reach the strength of a heaven saint master of this world. Because of that, Qingxua and I took you from that planet, but when we entered the crack in space, the both of us suffered tremendous damages. With not much strength remaining, we were unable to deliver you to where we intended, and thus we were only able to relocate you to a planet that was just stronger than your original world. So it really was because of you too. Jian Chen muttered. In truth, when he found out about the existence of the two sword spirits, he had already came to such a conclusion as a guess. Master, are you going to blame Ziying and Qingxua? Qingxua spoke with a timid voice. With a cordial smile, Jian Chen replied, if it weren't for you two, then I wouldn't have been able to experience such a magical world or come across such a large amount of strength. You've allowed me to grow strong and expand my world. I don't even have enough time to say all of my thanks, so what reason would I have to blame you two? After his reply, Qingxua immediately sighed in relief. Continuing to speak, Jian Chen said, what should we do so that you can recover as soon as you can? Master, we cannot recover to our full strength in this world. The qi of this world is far too weak. At the very best, we would be able to recover a small amount of it. Ziying said. Although he had heard what Ziying had said, Jian Chen still didn't quite understand. Since he was prioritizing the recovery of the sword spirits, he didn't pay any more attention to what he said. Then what could we do to recover your health for now? Ziying pointed at the multicolored stone floating some distance away. Master, this multicolored immortal crystal is the only thing that can help us for now. For the past few days, Qingsua and I have been absorbing the immortal crystal's spirit qi. Multicolored immortal crystal? What is that item? Jian Chen asked. Master, the multicolored immortal crystal is a crystal formed from the condensation of an immortal's qi after millions of years. It is not an item of this world, so the fact that we were able to come across it is an inconceivable matter. Millions of years, Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath of shock. Master, if only we were able to find more heavenly resources like the 100-grass wine. Otherwise, we will only be able to use the multicolored immortal crystal in order to heal. Seeing how weak the qi of this world is, it serves no use to us. Chapter 387, Chaotic Force. Now that the azure and violet sword spirits had taken on human form and were capable of speech, Jian Chen could communicate with them with ease. It was no longer as difficult as before where they needed to use telepathy. Jian Chen asked many questions that he hadn't understood and began to clear up the problems he had. At the very least, the most important thing he learned was that the sword spirits had been responsible for bringing him to this world. Qingsua, Ziying, is there any chance of me being able to cultivate with Saint Force anymore? Jian Chen asked quickly. Losing his Saint Force had left him unable to use his illusionary flash or the unbelievably fast sword skills that he was renowned for, so this caused him no small amount of unwillingness. The two sword spirits gave each other a look before looking at Jian Chen hesitantly. For a quick moment of silence, Ziying finally said, Master, using a special method, you would be able to continue cultivating with Saint Force. However, the Saint Force of this world is far too weak. Too weak? Jian Chen asked in disbelief. Ziying nodded his head, yes, Master. This world's Saint Force is far too weak, so I recommend that you do not restart your cultivation. He stopped talking for a moment before continuing to speak before Jian Chen could. Master, with Qingsua and I combined together, we could help you cultivate the chaotic force. Cultivate chaotic force? Is this chaotic force even stronger? Jian Chen asked with doubt. Ziying nodded his head, yes, Master. Chaotic force is the strongest of energy. Then how do I cultivate chaotic force? Jian Chen asked with some eagerness. He couldn't allow for such a strong opportunity to run by him. Master, Qingsua and I were born from chaos itself. Our yin and yang bodies were evolved from the chaotic force, and as long as Qingsua and I are combined, then we can extract chaotic force from any energy in the world. Ziying spoke with some satisfaction as if being able to cultivate chaotic force was an extremely terrific ability. The azure-robed Qingsua opened up her mouth to speak. Master, refining chaotic force requires a tremendous amount of world qi. It would take 10 years to refine even the smallest amount of chaotic force from the small amount of world qi here. Master, the ruler armaments in your hands contain a massive amount of energy. Ziying and Qingsua can use that energy to refine into chaotic force. Upon hearing this, Jian Chen was beyond pleased. The ruler armaments were next to useless for him since he couldn't use their power, making them two pieces of garbage. With the seal of Treasure Mountain on his body, he also had to worry about the Sure family using their special method to find him, which was a shame since Jian Chen had no idea how to deal with that. Right now, the violet and azure sword spirits could relieve him of a major headache by refining the energy within the weapons into chaotic force. This would then improve his strength, which was something he definitely agreed with. No problem, the Duanyan sword and the seal of Treasure Mountain I hand over to you then. When will you be able to refine them into chaotic force? Jian Chen asked a little impatiently. Seeing the impatient look on Jian Chen's face, Ziying and Qingsua began to smile. Master, we can refine the chaotic force whenever you wish. However, because the world qi in this world is quite weak, refining the chaotic force will use up a huge volume of qi. This will make Master's future cultivation even harder. No worries, if worst comes to worst, I'll find even more ruler armaments to take. Jian Chen waved his hands without concern. If you wish, then Master, if you could please hand over the ruler armaments. Ziying and Qingsua will refine the chaotic force for you. Qingsua spoke. Retreating from his mind space, Jian Shen grabbed both the Duanyan sword and the seal of Treasure Mountain before thinking to himself, Ziying, Qingsua, what is the next step? As soon as he thought of the words, Jian Shen felt his mind tremble for a moment before Ziying and Qingsua disappeared from his mind. In the next moment, they had left his mind space and appeared above his head. Right now the two looked like two weak glows of light and mist in human form, but their facial features could not be seen. Lifting his hand, a wave of mysterious energy began to raise out from the seal of Treasure Mountain, floating toward Ziying. It flew up from Jian Shen's hand to levitate over his head to where Ziying and Qingguo were floating. Ziying and Qingsua both closed their eyes and lifted out their arms. A faint glow of azure and violet could be seen from their hands before enveloping the seal of Treasure Mountain, spinning it in the same shape of the yin-yang symbol. 2 hours later, the seal of Treasure Mountain had been completely refined and transformed into an extremely pure, but powerful essence that rippled within the hands of Ziying and Qingsua. However, Ziying didn't stop the process there and began to use his origin energy to hammer it. This went on for another hour, causing the energy to turn gray in color like a ball of smoke. Not only was it faint in color, there was an indescribable air to it. Ziying and Qingsua both raised their hands, causing the gray gas to enter Jian Shen's body before resting within his dantian. Master, quick! Use the Azulite Sword Law and transform this chaotic force into your own power. Ziying and Qingsua both spoke in synchronism. Without delay, Jian Shen began to do as told. This process only took up 4 hours of Jian Shen's time. After those 4 hours, Jian Shen had successfully transformed the chaotic force into his own energy. When he looked at the wisp-like energy within his dantian, he couldn't help but ask, Ziying, Qingsua, is this really chaotic force? Yes, Master. This is chaotic force in its initial stage. Ziying spoke. Hearing this, Jian Shen was confused. The initial stage of chaotic force? What does that mean? Ziying looked a little embarrassed, but he didn't say anything else. Qingsua began to smile as if trying to apologize for him. Master, this is the weakest amount of chaotic force. The true power found within chaotic force cannot be recreated just yet because the amount of energy in these ruler armaments is still far too weak, so the true chaotic force cannot be attained. I understand now. Jian Shen spoke with clarity. However, he still only knew some basics regarding the chaotic force. A ruler armament was created after the energy from a 9th layer Heaven Saint Master crystallized, but he didn't think that the overwhelming power from such an item would result in such a tiny amount of chaotic force. From this, Jian Shen couldn't even possibly imagine just how strong the chaotic force would be. Master, the cultivation methods of this continent do not suit the cultivation methods of the chaotic force. In the future, you will only be able to cultivate using the Azulite Sword Law. The Azulite Sword Law were actually a high-leveled cultivation method written by a deity. Written inside are ways to cultivate using the world chi of any world and convert it into chaotic force. Ziying spoke. Cultivation methods were special methods on absorbing and refining energy to become one's own strength. The Azulite Sword Law was truly an extremely mysterious cultivation method that worked in any situation to transform any energy into chaotic force. Nodding his head, Jian Shen felt his heart sigh in admiration. He didn't think that the Azulite Sword Law would have such a purpose. Master, but, Ziying opened his mouth once more before hesitation overcame him as if he didn't know whether or not he should tell him. But what? Qingsua blinked rapidly for a moment as she hesitated before speaking with her light voice. Master, the Azulite Sword Law has 3 volumes. You have the first volume, but not the other 2. What? Jian Shen cried out, unable to contain his shock. What could we do about the other 2 volumes then? Ziying and Qingsua both looked at each other briefly, as if hesitating, before Qingsua spoke. Master, in truth, the first volume is only enough for you to cultivate chaotic force. The other 2 volumes are still a long ways away from you. Ziying piped up next. Yes, Master, there is no need for you to look for the other 2 volumes at the moment. 1 is enough for now. Wait until you have more strength, then the other 2 volumes will be attainable. Furthermore, chaotic force is far too tyrannic. Master, if you wish to cultivate chaotic force in the future, then you must have a chaotic body refined as well. Only a chaotic body will be able to withstand the chaotic force. Otherwise, if Master were to try and use the chaotic force, it would cause a tremendous amount of damage. What? Cultivating chaotic force requires a chaotic body? How does one cultivate that? Jianshan asked the two. He hadn't thought that it would be so complicated. Master, refining the chaotic body is explained within the Azulite Sword laws. Ziying replied. With that, Jianshan asked a single question in surprise. So it does not require a large amount of chaotic force? It does require a large amount of chaotic force, but Master doesn't need to worry about that now. Ziying spoke carefully. He didn't know just how Jianshan would react to this. Jianshan almost felt dizzy from this conversation, but he wasn't very disappointed. Taking in a long deep breath, he began to mutter, I just knew there wasn't such a thing as a free meal in this world. I didn't think that the chaotic force would be this troublesome. A ruler armament had only a sliver of chaotic force, and a large amount of chaotic force is required to refine the chaotic body. Good heavens, where would I go to find such a large concentration of this energy? Jianshan didn't quite know if he was happy or sad about this entire situation. Although he had come across a great change within his body, his path would be a long and narrow one for now. Seeing Jianshan's emotions, Qingsua couldn't hold back her silence and began to console him. Master, do not be so discouraged. There is plenty of time in the future, and although the path set out for you is long and hard, you will one day have both the chaotic body and chaotic force. Jianshan quickly calmed down after she spoke. He knew all too well that having a great benefit would require a great price. There was no such thing as a free meal, and there was no such thing as a prize without a price. If one wanted a large amount of power, they had to be ready to pay a large price for it. Forget it, a step is still a step. Ziying, Qingsua, let's continue with the Duanyan sword. This item has no use to me and puts me in harm's way. There's no way to tell whether or not the Jetta clan or Shi family will try to track us, so there is no benefit in their prolonged existence. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.